right? So I'll be online at my house at like 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to participate in this conference, working on this. It's exciting stuff. I was happy to share it with you all today.
Yeah, we were happy to have it. So, yeah, thank you, Tim. Again, Dr. Tim Burns from University of St. Thomas. All right, so yeah, that brings us to, so we're a little bit behind now, but that's okay. I'm going to turn it over to Yusha. I know Yusha doesn't need the full 15 minutes, he was telling me. So we'll kind of go right to him, and then we'll pivot right to Fernando afterwards. So yeah, Yusha, feel free to begin your presentation. The title of his essay is Stoicism and Society.
Thanks, guys. Thanks to all the presenters. So I'll get right into it. I don't have a fancy presentation ready or anything like that. So I just typed up an essay and it's in 5 parts, but I'll just focus on the society part, and that's why I don't need the entire 15 minutes, and we can save some time, hopefully, for a conversation. So I write that philanthropia, or love of mankind, is associated with the area of action and states that people should broaden primal distress for others in a manner that is congruent with the employment of the Stoic virtues. Stoics have been adamant in embracing their social function, and as Emperor Marcus frequently suggested himself in his writings, was, quote, get up in the morning and do the job of a human being, end quote. In other words, to be beneficial to society. Loving mankind is an ethical duty, regardless of the unsightly people and agencies of individuals may be the factor of natural disgust. Philanthropia is I can never say this word. Philanthropia is intently associated with the idea of oikiosis the system uh, highlights of the system of creating your own. Although this could sound absolutely egocentrical, I guarantee you that it could not be further. As a character, we first get an experience of self and consequently take care of ourselves. Next, there may be our own circle of relatives with the essence with which is essentially contributing factor of who oneself and consequently your authentic self is, ensuing into a man or woman who take care of and take obligation of the family's well-being. The idea is similarly extended to other interactions such as friends, colleagues, neighbors, and progressively encompasses entire mankind. Seneca believed Seneca believed that one should serve his or her unique vicinity of being and additionally humanity by refraining anguish of others while promoting the good of the society and its patrons. Cosmopolitan Stoics believed that our obligations to mankind transcends borders because of our shared humanity. Now, that will be the end of the passage that I wanted to focus on. And if anyone wants, I can share with you the entirety of the essay. It's not in an essay format. It's just typed up, but uh, feel free to feel free to propose any questions that you may have or any concerns about Seneca, Stoicism, modern Stoicism, the history of it. I'll be more than happy to answer to the best of my abilities.
Yeah, I'll pose a question. What do you I mean, do you see Stoicism as being relevant today? So could we take the lessons taught to us by Seneca and apply them to our own lives in the present?
I mean, yeah, that is partially what I'm proposing because of our previous philosophy club meetings that we have held. So, in my opinion, Stoicism is kind of looked at negatively because of the lack of explanation. And in my opinion, a better way to explain it is to be in control of one's emotions, vices, and anything else that might come off as a negative aspect to another person, as I mentioned in the passage, and as Seneca also mentions in his writings. So if you look at it throughout today's presentations, whether it was Istra's, Ava's, Tim's, or any other presenter that went before me, I think we can all agree that today's society is in far more of a, well, how to put it easily, we are on the verge of self-destruction. Why? Because we fail to control ourselves. And as Isra was mentioning in the very beginning, that TV shows, media, anything that was made public was censored enough to where there was a clearly distinguishable line between children and adults, whether it was protests, cartoons, news, or anything of sort. And nowadays, if you look at Cartoon Network, they're using these curse words that even me growing up, I was born 1997, which isn't too far off, but even us growing up, we never had experienced that kind of stuff. I still refrain from cursing, and I'm 23, 24 now. So I look at these high school students and they're cursing left and right. They completely lack the respect of their parents. Why? Because they were never shown how to control themselves. We, especially in the American society, look at control as a very negative aspect of things instead of promoting it that, hey, control your emotions. Don't burst out into an angry ball of fire for no reason. So I would say, yeah, it is completely applicable in today's society. And Menzi.
All right, thank you for that response. I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yeah, look, I see where you're coming from. And again, tying in some of the previous presentations, it's we've seen the prevalence of social media and how those can be almost intentionally antagonistic in a variety of ways, coupled with again these changing sensibilities. It becomes very easy to sort of indulge in the emotional expression that is being triggered by whatever the case may be, whatever it is that happens to impact you in that way. Stoicism does teach us the virtue of, again, I guess we can call it in more contemporary terms, being reserved. But for the Stoics, it's important to keep in mind that being reserved, it comes from an impetus of acceptance, which is to say, again, for the Stoics, they understood that the future was already decided. So whatever happens was going to happen regardless, and you're powerless to stop it. So why get upset about anything? There's nothing you could have done anyway. That's the root of this idea of being in charge of your emotions or keeping them in check, and in the way you're describing. Because again, there's no reason, quote unquote, it's not rational to get super upset over unfortunate tragedies because that's God's will or something along these lines. But okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that response. And yeah, I guess let's transition here rather quickly to the presentation of the dockets, going from one philosophy club officer to another.
Just a quick note before we move forward. I think I brought it up in the previous conference as well, like last year. The only thing certain about us being alive is death. And aside from that, whether it comes from choosing, not choosing, something being determined for us or otherwise, everything else is up to chance. So the only thing that is certain about life is death. And I think it's hysterically ironic about that.
Fair enough. I appreciate the take. But yeah, okay, so now we'll move to Fernando J. Castro Gonzalez. He's going to present something called the relevance of fleeting moments. And I don't know if it's more of a presentation or more of an open-ended discussion, but yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Fernando.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, good stuff. Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing well, since it seems like this is not yet the time to answer. Was a tricky point in there. Let me stretch a bit. It has been wonderful, almost 4 hours. Geez, it says easy, but it is not that easy. All right, so yes, this is, at the end of the day, I did created this type of thoughts process so we can kind of like have some words on them afterwards. I am using this conference just to post out a couple of the most interesting ideas I've learned as a philosopher or as an officer, I guess, philosopher. Huh? I did that combination there during this semester. I have learned a lot specifically for Mansi. I'm going to give him that, and he's in somehow highlighted into my first presentation. And I want to see what your thoughts are, because I'm always happy to explore new ideas. So, okay, too much wording, unnecessary maybe, but I'm gonna just go straight to it. Which again, the title of my work today is "The Fleeting Moments Relevant." So yes, I wrote this. Our life often appears as a constant wait for those special moments that seemingly give meaning to our existence. While we focus our senses on that next big event, it is easy to miss all the little experiences and interactions that, added together, form who we are, create meaning to potential success, and constitute the majority of our living time. Understanding how vital all activities are can help feel a stronger sense of realization, as one apparent success in life will not be subjected to one or two events that will potentially be just mere on another minor interaction. I started wondering about this idea thanks to one of our movie film series and my advisor, Jeff Mancy. Mancy introduced us to a series of vignettes called We Don't Know. These recordings focus on the interactions a couple have in between major events. These were full of random conversations, walking out in the streets, fighting due to a misunderstanding of a difference of opinions, nothing too different from what we do in our daily lives. However, while I was watching, I noticed something special. These seemingly unimportant events carry a huge impact in our lives. The accumulation of these create our perception of ourselves, influence what other big events we want to tackle, and it even affects our mood during these important events. Our theoretical success could very well depend on them, and yet people do not pay attention to them. Sometimes I notice people suffering of depression due to lack of engagement with these seemingly minor events. Even the fact that most people would rather watch a movie packed with flashes and sound effects, void of any information that one can use in our lives, rather than a movie without any intense plot but rich in thoughts for you to take and grow, shows that we're constantly seeking intense emotions. I do not believe there is nothing inherently bad about it. The problem I see comes when one finally arrives to its destination. More often than not, the experience tends to be one different from the one we expected. Sometimes these experiences are not as positive as we would have hoped, and the event can drag a person toward a negative path. I can only assume that this is what the creator of a quote saying something around
Hey, you just got muted.
interesting. Somebody's muting me. Okay. Uh, I don't know onto what you heard.
Just the last few words you missed.
Okay, I guess I have to repeat back. Okay, so I can only assume that this is what the creator of the quote saying something around the lines of the end goal is not the important, but the road that you take to achieve it was referring to. This idea reminded me my Kung Fu experience and why I love it so much. During one of my training sessions, I asked my master what Kung Fu means. Looking back to my interactions with him, I can see that a big part of who I am is thanks to him. He had this cadence whenever he spoke with anybody, and he was a lot of condensed information on meanings with information that he just said with a few words and a smile on his face. The interaction that we have together, and even the leadership role that he had in my life, really speaks about the leadership influence that I want to be as an adult currently. He loved to speak, but always encouraged me to find the answer myself instead of just asking for them. He said to me that Kung Fu could be summarized as doing things right, that his goal was with these classes was not to just teach me and how to be more physically fit, but to also teach me how to devote myself to sweep my house floor as motivated and dedicated as when I go to a tournament. He continued posing seemingly absurd examples such as to work on walking properly, breathing adequately, and so on. I remember that he explained to me that in order to learn how to breathe, all I had to do was to watch a baby doing it. Since for babies, that is a relatively new experience, so they focus most of their body and themselves to experience this new learned trait. And I'm sure that we don't even pay too much attention to it because we already get used to it. And as of right now, most of us are doing that saying natural breathing process wrongly. Back then, I took his teachings to word not necessarily because I understood its full meaning, but because I respected him. It took me 14 years to even grasp how deep his teaching actually was. During this global pandemic, we all live circumstances we never dreamt possible. In my case, I dedicated almost all my time working on projects for Dallas College. They did give me some inspiration to overcome these challenges that came with it, but the longer I immerse on them, I started to forget to pay attention to tiny details on my surroundings. One, to pay more attention to my families and friends. They had plenty of events that I did not attend since I was looking for specific goals. Other people's important events were happening and I was not engaged as I should with them. So when the time comes that I was finally in my big moments, I felt something was missing. I could not enjoy those moments as much as I wanted because I was missing something that I could not see. Along the way, other challenges came into my path. I had to engage in complicated and emotional packed conversation with those who felt pushed away or hurt, which at the end made my pursuit of success harder and less satisfactory. The resources I had that allowed me to create the projects that I work came from minor events. My personality even came from those minor events. Those big moments now are just talking points during those unimportant events. The more I think about it, the fleeting moments we have are in fact one of the most important ones we have. They give a special meaning to us. They give us a strength and stability when we may need it. They give us an special use during our pursuit of happiness. And the way I am seeing it, they allow us to live our life more fully. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that was a very kind of thoughtful, contemplative soliloquy there. And I love how you tied it back to the last installment in the philosophy and film series when we watched We Don't Know, the vignettes, because I do think that was a major component of those films. If y'all, for those of you who were with us a couple Wednesdays ago for the philosophy and film series, yeah, the vignette in itself, it kind of operates like a memory. And what's interesting is that when we saw those series of vignettes, we saw all of these individual scenes that could be interpreted as isolated, like just different scenes. But the way the human being's sort of narrative imagination works, we took the vignettes and sort of created an overarching story almost intuitively, almost naturally. And so I think that tends to happen, as you're saying, with memories, so long as we pay attention. And so it sounded like, yeah, you caught yourself. You noticed, hey, I'm not taking notice of these things anymore. And yeah, it seems like it had sort of an existential impact on you, that moment of self-awareness. Yeah, but again, just to put a bow on your point, the key word is fleeting. The moments are so quick that it's almost like if you were to stop and appreciate them as they're happening, you're going to miss the depth of meaning or feeling that comes with actually experiencing them in the here and now. So it's almost like appreciating them after the fact, and then maybe even appreciating the fact that they were fleeting, as though their temporariness kind of gives them a greater value in and of itself, but also greater value to your overall understanding of who you are and the values you've chosen. If we can choose our values, Courtney. But okay. Thank you for that. Was there anything else? Anybody else want to have any other questions or comments for Fernando? And if not, I suppose we can move on to the next scheduled presentation.
I'll just pose a comment. I guess I put it in the chat, but I guess it didn't deliver yet. So beautiful presentation, and your I guess the finer detail in your point just reminds me of Master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda. My favorite movie, by the way. And the single quote that I can never forget is when he tells Po that yesterday was history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why it's called a present. And I say this quite often to people, and they think that, oh, I'm this wise old soul that knows everything. But in actuality, I just pulled this quote from a cartoon. So I think we do miss a lot of today in hopes of either making our tomorrow better or reminiscing about our past. So great job on the presentation.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, and I'm responding to Osita. Yeah, I did Shaolin Chonfa. The Chonfa was removed later on, but it's mostly Shaolin, which is the oldest martial art there is when it comes to at least Kung Fu. Yeah.
Do we have our next presenter here, Professor Manzi?
Yeah, I was just looking at that. It doesn't appear as though she's in the room. So our next presenter is Liliana Mata, and her presentation is called Intentions and Virtues of Social Media. So it's intended to be returned to the concept of social media, again, specifically as it's discussed in the Social Dilemma documentary. Yeah, Liliana, are you here? Maybe under a different moniker? And if she's not, I do know there was one student who was supposed to present, but couldn't make it on time. If that student is still around, we could take that presentation. Adiam, are you here? And if not, we can continue to talk about Fernando's presentation. Because you know, I'm happy to sort of elaborate. Going once, Liliana, going twice. All right. So yeah, let's build on a couple of things, because honestly, we could talk about Yusha's presentation as well. This idea of Stoicism, interestingly enough, it does seem to present something of an antithesis to what Fernando's talking about here. Because again, for the Stoic, as Yusha was explaining, the Stoic need not, I suppose, give too much weight or precedence or value to anything. Even the monumental moments, or the, you know, the fleeting, more discrete moments that sort of elude our attention sometimes. All of it is sort of valuable insofar as it's been sort of preordained, seemingly. So, you know, one's future. And so for that reason, it might even be considered something of a distraction or a waste of time to focus on these quote unquote fleeting moments and appreciate their value too much. Because again, for the Stoic, you're moving forward as you should be. You're not looking behind. That's something very different, I would say, from what Fernando's espousing here, which is this idea of no, not just stop and smell the roses before you, but stop and remember the roses you were smelling back then, and try to consider how, I suppose, how sacred or how cherishable those moments are. Because I'm not so sure Stoics would see it that way. Perhaps there needs to be some sort of underlying individualism, maybe not radically so, but a sense of one's self individually that allows one to piece together the moments, the fleeting moments, Fernando, that are important to Ferdinando. And it's Ferdinando's decision. And again, that's pretty antithetical to the Stoics, but yeah.
I mean, I do have to say that it's also not just appreciating, but paying attention. Because sometimes you're not there, like your mind is in the future. So like your mind is like, I need to do this, and there's so much information, there is so much going on like next to you, that instead of just thinking there, if you start like just addressing what is happening to you, like those moments are like equally important as that one. Like that one will be important whenever you are there, but it's not the most important thing right now, because at the end of the day, like anything can happen. I mean, you can just, you know, be so focused on it that then you die like right 5 minutes after that, and that's it. You never get to experience that thought that you were just having. Um, and it also creates some sort of expectations, or you start like adding things that may not be the actual event. So whenever you actually facing it, you have your expectation and the actuality of the event, and you yourself destroy of living the experience to the fullest instead of, you know, just let it happen. Um, so like that's what I'm trying to refer to. Like yes, even breathing. And I remember that it was very funny because he said like we're supposed to breathe with like the whole body, but we are so focused on just moving that we just do like, and you don't even feel your whole thing. So whenever somebody tells you like, hey, take a deep breath, you don't even know how to take a deep breath. It's like that is the most essential action there is for you to live. That's what, like, they expand you so you can breathe, and you're doing it wrong now. So it's, how is that even possible? So, like, I don't think we appreciate, like, really, like, the most tiny events that there is in our surrounding, not even breathing. I don't think we necessarily have to give them like a huge meaning, but at the very least, be present, and you're going to learn a lot from it. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I think Yusha, you unmute. Okay, at any rate, yeah, I like what you said, especially, I like everything you said, but especially that first part about being kind of future oriented. And again, we had some more political presentations earlier that kind of touched upon this idea of sort of, you can say it's rooted in sort of a capitalistic influence, but it's easy to, as some of the presentations were suggesting, but it's easy to, at the very least, we can say, kind of place our sense of self and place our identity and values and goals in things that we have yet to ascertain, which is to say, we value the things that we're pursuing. And in fact, that's a very common existentialist understanding of things, is that you are more your future than you are your present self, because it's where you're trying to go that says more about you than where you're at. Now, I bring this up because, again, I consider the Stoics. I'm trying to kind of, juxtapose both of y'all's presentations here. If you're a Stoic and you're still a person, you have goals and you're pursuing them and things along those lines. And I mean like a traditional Stoic. But then if something tragic happens and maybe, you're going to lose your life because of it, there's a certain sense of closure for the Stoic. There's not so much regret or sort of like, oh no, now my death is upon me. It's more like, it's almost more serene or tranquil. It's like, well, this is my time. And that's how they would think of it as. Kind of thinking about your point, though, Fernando, it's like, if something like that were to happen and something tragic would intervene and keep one from one's goals and values, and you've had this happen, Fernando, early on. But so I wonder if Stoicism couldn't actually be beneficial in a way where you're able to appreciate and impress upon yourself these fleeting moments, and you cultivate an awareness of them as they're happening, so you don't lose them. But it could be the regret of not appreciating all those moments when you're maybe on your deathbed. That could be very troubling. But it's not something that I think Stoics necessarily deal with. So I'm wondering if there's room for dialogue between the two presentations. Yeah.
So are those two really, sorry to interrupt, are those two schools of thoughts really exclusive to one another, though? Because I know that for some Eastern philosophies like Taoism and the idea of Wu Wei, it kind of expresses this idea of effortless action, where it's kind of like it's stoic in a sense, where you're moving through life and you're kind of just allowing sort of what's inside of you to come out and to act upon that. So is that necessarily like, are those two really that different?
No, I don't think necessarily. I think that's a good connection. Yeah. And again, yeah, please.
Sure. So I took interest in, Fernando, your discussion of the breath because I practice yoga, and yoga is really this movement in service to the breath. Sometimes in the West, we get this notion that yoga is an exercise to get fit, but it's far more to do with breath and eventually leading to meditation. But this idea of the newborn baby breathing, that's something that I've heard my teachers in yoga mention, but I never interpret it as the baby is breathing well because it's this effortful movement. I thought it was this effortless movement. And so as you were discussing breath, I was really considering, should the breath in yoga be effortful or effortless, like easy? And in yoga, we have this principle of all poses being both stiram and sukham, which is effort and ease, so maybe both intentionally. And I think that's like the nice way to put your two presentations perhaps together in some ways. If we can find a balance, maybe we have that breath.
Yeah, that's a very important thing. In Kung Fu, we have something that's called Qigong, which is similar to what you were mentioning. We do our forms similarly as we would, but slowly. But the whole process is to match our movement with the breath, with the
Mhm.
breathing. So we have to pretend sometimes to make us like like we have to imagine like we have like a water in between our mouth and we have to like be moving and like move it all the way and kind of like start like thinking. And I remember that they they asked us, at least my master asked me, like to think of colors. So whenever I was breathing in, I was supposed to like breathe in blue. So I have to like picture blue, and then whenever I was breathing out, it has to be yellow. So like like the whole process of being like focusing on my breathing and my movement and like being conscious of how my work operates, like it did help me be more like flexible, I guess, because I was more aware of how my body actually move and like I can understand like my limitations and so on. So then I knew exactly how lower I can go and things like that, and how to push myself further, which other people were not aware of because they weren't thinking of how important these basic elements are, which is it's very simple. Like we ask these things to kids, but we stop teaching them how to do it later. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was great. Yeah, thank you, Christina. I think that's a good way to sort of unite them. And I was about to bring up yoga too, so I'm glad you did. Okay, that brings us to our next presenter. It's our final guest presenter. But she's it's a family one. She's part of the Dallas College philosophy faculty. So unlike the others who are outside guests. So this is Professor Christina Hunsinger, and she is presenting something called Kant's notion of skepticism and the production and consumption of contemporary news media. So yeah, take it away, Christina.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll launch right into it. I want to give you a little bit of background of a essay by Kant that I encourage you all to go read. It's a short essay, but there's a little bit of history that I just find to be really fascinating and fun. In 1783, an editor of the periodical Berlin Monthly published his opinion that the Enlightenment necessitated marriage reform. Knowing that his idea would register as an affront to religious tradition, the essay titled Proposal Not to Engage the Clergy Any Longer When Marriages Are Conducted was published anonymously. Social institutions like marriage are constantly evolving. By the 17th and 18th century, social and political philosophers in Europe were pioneering ideas that would seek to peel back religious authority. Influential among Enlightenment concepts was that reason, free from religious dogma and tradition, can understand human life, and that life is about the pursuit of happiness. Secular marriages based upon love and not merely property and heredity were becoming desirable in this age. The anonymous publication of the Culture War article on marriage was sensible, as religious authorities were expectedly offended by it, and repercussions for offending religious authorities at this time were often serious. One such authority, Reverend Johann Friedrich Zollner, observed that proposal not to engage the clergy made appeals to the Enlightenment movement. In response, the Reverend issued a question, which Berlin Monthly, a facilitator of public debate, published. Zollner asked if clergy should not officiate marriages because of the Enlightenment. What is the Enlightenment? Define it for me, please. Some important thinkers responded to the Reverend's question. The most significant among them was none other than a highly influential Western philosopher, a genius of the late Enlightenment, Immanuel Kant. Interesting about the what is the Enlightenment question is that it needed to be asked. When Kant issued his response to Zollner in 1784, the Enlightenment had already been underway for many decades. However, historical epics don't pop into existence with prepared vision statements. So the opportunity for reflection upon the age reveals a unique glimpse into a critical historical movement that Kant will simultaneously participate in and construct. Kant's essay, An Answer to the Question, What is Enlightenment?, defines enlightenment in its opening 2 sentences. Enlightenment, Kant writes, is man's emergence from his self-incurred immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's own understanding without the guidance of another. It's natural for children to exhibit mental immaturity, which requires guidance. You may have experience of caring for children who make poor decisions when left unattended for even short periods. However, at a certain age, it is inappropriate to continue to need guidance in the use of one's reason. We might blame a capable individual for seeking guidance past the age when they should know better. Kant provides examples of just who immature adults are seeking developmentally inappropriate guidance from when he writes, quote, "If I have a book that thinks for me, a pastor who acts as my conscience, a physician who prescribes my diet, and so on, then I have no need to exert myself. I have no need to think. If only I can pay, others will take care of that disagreeable business for me." In this quote, Kant does not reject consulting experts in the use of one's reason, but he does reject relinquishing the task of thinking to the book, the pastor, the physician. He adds, those guardians who have kindly taken supervision upon themselves see to it that the overwhelming majority of mankind should consider the step to maturity, thinking for oneself, not only as hard, but as extremely dangerous. Despite Kant's recognition that guardians are responsible for fostering informational dependency through manipulation by fear, in other words, by making it seem that independent thought is difficult and dangerous, he makes overcoming the problem of self-incurred immaturity a personal obligation. The goal of enlightenment is a collective social awakening, but individuals, not institutions, are responsible for eliminating their own obstacles to its realization. These personal obstacles are laziness and lack of courage. Making enlightenment an individual obligation and not an institutional one may have been an attempt to avoid further offending religious and political powers. Kant gives a flattering assessment of Frederick the Great's sensibility not to place limits on public debate. And this flattery seems aimed at solidifying some informal truce between the sovereign and thinkers like himself. Kant, however, may have intended to establish a personal obligation to pursue enlightenment for less pragmatic reasons. Identifying the responsibility to think for oneself is consistent with Kant's ethics of duty, which recognizes our rational agency. Kant envisions that there will always be independent thinkers in society, especially among its educated class of guardians. He expresses hope that, if given freedom in the civic use of their reason, guardians might advance the Enlightenment's causes. His example is a church scholar who would lead the congregation as informed by official church doctrine on Sundays and engage in public debate guided by his own conscience when he's not serving in this official capacity. Though Kant denies that Enlightenment had become fully actualized in 1784, he writes that there is a remedy. This enlightenment requires nothing but freedom, and the most innocent of all that may be called freedom. Freedom to make public use of one's reason in all matters. This assessment that enlightenment only requires freedom precedes Kant. A century earlier, John Milton established his self-righting principle, the idea that in a fair debate, good and truthful arguments will always win out over lies and deceit. And so, to summarize, Kant suggests that as social conditions permit intellectual freedom, enlightenment is sure to follow. Still, it's our personal obligation to overcome self-incurred immaturity and think for ourselves. Now, our age contrasts with Kant's in important ways. In the United States, we do not have churches and feudal aristocracies exercising arbitrary power over our communication. Rather, in the US and in democracies worldwide, freedom of communication is protected as rights of speech, press, and assembly. Additionally, in 1750, just 10% of the population of the German lands had critical reading ability. However, in the United States in 2021, almost 8 times as many US adults have medium to high English literacy skills. Has this increased political freedom and increased literacy resulted in the best ideas rising to the top? In September 2020, a survey conducted by the Survey Center on American Life found that approximately 2/3 of Americans agreed with the statement that you can learn more about what is going on in the world by ignoring mainstream news and doing your own research. Though this expresses a willingness to think independently, perhaps even a rejection of informational dependency, the effort to do one's research in response to distrust of mainstream media often means accepting fringe media and online conspiracy theories. The headline-grabbing QAnon, a conspiracy movement that posits that Donald Trump has been working in secret to capture high-powered figures who are engaged in child abduction and trafficking, is still a fringe belief. But polling reveals that 1/4 of those who know what it is think there's some truth to it. And that number is growing rapidly as QAnon begins to converge with COVID-19 conspiracies. The proliferation of falsehoods on social media is a modern problem. A 2018 MIT Research Lab study found that false news stories are 70 times more likely to be retweeted than true stories. It also takes true stories about 6 times as long to reach 1,500 people as it does for false stories to reach the same number of people. A theory advanced by the research lab to explain this phenomenon is that we may be more likely to promote stories that are novel, and false stories have a novelty factor. Other research suggests that social media algorithms amplify negative emotions because negative emotions like fear and anger, including racial and ethnic hatred, are reliable triggers of social media engagement. While our views, our likes, our shares, and our comments are not all endorsements of such content, they do help it appear at the top of our feeds. To quote Jaron Lanier, author of the book 10 Reasons for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now, engagement, the driver of social media algorithms, is not meant to serve any particular purpose other than its own enhancement, and yet the result is an unnatural global amplification of the, quote, easy emotions, which happen to be the negative ones. An unintentional design outcome of social media algorithms is that our discussions become biased towards topics that excite our reptilian amygdala and increasingly are not rooted in reality. One may adopt a Kantian critique and claim that the real problem online is that individuals are not responsible. There are entire subreddits devoted to sharing the entertainingly confounding misinformation that people post to Facebook. Seemingly, they should know better. A problem for the don't be so gullible angle, however, is that what we are selecting to engage with online and what is being selected for us is not always transparent. Feed recommendations are based upon our usage of social platforms. You might be familiar with the duly exciting and reality-bending discovery of YouTube rabbit holes. Online advertising is similarly targeted to our browsing history and demographic data, as are Google search results. If you've ever had the surreal experience of hearing someone explain worldviews that seem otherworldly to you, it may be the consequence of that other person engaging in an online world that you never really see. Hyperpolarized filter bubbles become further solidified when we go online to fulfill social needs. Individually, meeting one's needs for social engagement online can have benefits, especially during a period of increased isolation brought on by the pandemic. However, in considering how the largest social media platforms have shaped public discourse, the desire for social validation has not reliably led to more rational and more empathetic communication. In a 2016 speech to Stanford Graduate School of Business students, Chamath Palihapitiya, former vice president for user growth at Facebook, had this to say: "The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops we've created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth." Should we simply forego the benefits of online communities? Immanuel Kant was not averse to using social motivators to increase our enjoyment in the exchange of ideas. Kant was a lover of social functions, and his friends often criticized him for going to too many parties. Kant developed his own rules for dinner parties. At the start of a dinner party, he said, people should swap stories about what had been happening recently. Then there should be a major phase of reflective discourse in which those present attempt to clarify an important topic. Finally, there should be a closing period of hilarity. People should laugh so that everyone leaves in a good mood. The structure of Kant's party sounds like the ideal for public discourse: informational, reflective, and entertaining. The question, however, becomes, how do we accomplish this in 280 characters? Michel Foucault's last lectures before his death in 1984 were in response to Immanuel Kant's essay, An Answer to the Question, What is Enlightenment? Foucault calls the question one that modern philosophy has never managed to get rid of. My assessment is that we still have not attained the long-awaited ambition of an enlightened society. This is partially due to the kinds of discourse and information filtering that are a product of popular social media platforms. Even in our offline lives, we are impacted. According to mediatization theory, modern social institutions have been mediatized, which is to say that their structures have been altered to accommodate media. You may consider how corporate public relations, political debates, and legacy media journalism become framed for social media consumption. The business executive might select the tweet-worthy phrase as opposed to the nuanced argument. The journalist might agonizingly draft the clickbait-worthy headline as opposed to the more descriptive one. As with institutions, so with all of us. Our attention and interests, what we care about, what makes us laugh and cry, are increasingly influenced by social media companies. Kant's hope that greater freedom in public discourse would lead to the proliferation of the best ideas could not anticipate the influence of social media on our world. My hope is that we are just experiencing the growing pains of emerging media and not the end of civilization. The foreclosed ability to have substantive discussions with one another has real-world consequences. In 2020 and in 2021, we have seen the impact of increased polarization on US political stability following the presidential election and on global health during an ongoing pandemic. The uncritical acceptance of media that we find favorable and that our online enclaves echo back to us is that which we should scrutinize. We should have courage to use our own reasoning. That is the motto of the Enlightenment, Kant tells us. While we may, as a general principle, follow Kant's advice to shake off our laziness in order to think, we can also demand that social media companies are held accountable for supporting access to information, as well as communities that promote civility, curiosity, and social welfare.
All right, thank you, Christina. That was fantastic. Yeah, I got to be honest with you. On the one hand, it's a little scary, but at the same time, I believe Kant is a source for optimism. By the way, that anecdote of him at the party is, I'm not familiar. That's so funny. He's like, let's party. Here are the rules.
It sounds like a good time to me.
Yes, sure. But okay, yeah, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for you to field questions. We got to move on to the next one, but yeah, once again, thank you for presenting. And Professor Hunsinger teaches at Eastfield College, or rather Eastfield campus in Dallas College.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, and that brings us to part 2 of Fernando. So our next presenter is one that you heard from already, Fernando J. Castro Gonzalez. This one, I believe it's going to be kind of similar to the last one. It's more of an open-ended sort of sharing of thoughts and maybe generating of discussion. It's called The Commitment Cultivator. Take it away, Fernando.
Thank you. Yes. One thing, Orlando is trying to pose a question, but I'm not completely sure if it is from Christina or I don't know.
I'll just put it in the chat. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so yes, it's round two, I guess. This one, it follows the same path. Yes, as I was mentioning, it was just me trying to write out my thoughts. I do follow Mancy's suggestion of recording myself and so on, but recordings are not proper for this type of things. And sometimes it's also good for me to just write it down. So that's basically what I'm doing. Okay, so this one is commitment cultivator. I'm gonna try to not expand too much time since we could be getting behind and I don't want that from happening to anyone. Okay, so the commitment cultivator. This is what I wrote again. One thing is to seek financial success. It is quite another to seek improvement and collective success of one's fellow companions. This presentation intends to explore the roots of both motivations and how each approach can result in others' call for actions and directing the directions our communities follows. So, in order to be on the same page, we need to define two words, motivation and commitment. Let's start with motivation. What's motivation? After some Google research, the reason it says that it is the reason or reasons one has for acting or behavior in a particular way. Today, we can say that we are motivated to attend this philosophy conference. Some of us will be for genuine love for the subject, other may be for a more practical gain, such as an extra credit. The point is that in our lives, in order to do anything, we need some type of motivation. Now, commitment. What is commitment? Again, Google provide the research for this. It says that it's an agreement or pledge to do something in the future. This is something that happens more often than we realize. Whenever we say to ourselves that we're going to start a new diet or someone asks you to attend an event, when you agree to it, you are committing to a future action. Does this mean that you're going to do it? No, not necessarily. I am sure that everyone here have at some point wanted to do something just to find ourselves half the way looking to do something else. However, that is when motivation kicks in. Both elements alone does not generate much good, since our motivation can also drain out. In my experience, this factor works similarly to a muscle. One has to practice to stay motivated and commitment to a goal, and the longer you practice, the better you are at it. Previous to the global pandemic, it was more common to see people committing to new activities and be motivated to explore new grounds. But this academic year exposed me to something I never considered. Most people engage in projects due to what I call temporary external influencers. Being surrounded of others can push you to do activities even when maybe you don't really want to do it. But once all you have is mostly yourself, then your ability to continue growing and exploring life will depend mostly only on you. Here is when I started to get a bit worried, since I saw that the number of people who are training these traits or have a huge motivator at home are considerably less than I initially thought there was. The academic activities that I saw flooded with the students before were on a single digit numbers now, with the exception of course, the always engaging philosophy club. So yeah, hooray for us. But as a curious minded, I started wondering how could it be the case? I mean, I am sure that all the homework we have received since pre-kinder will have trained us very well for committing to a specific task. If I take this year's academic activities as a measurement of how things work in our communities, it seems like most of what we do are driven really by very few people. In this case, I am not referring to political positions or anything like that, but our surrounding seems to be tailored by those who have trained to be committed and motivated to a specific goal. Those without a clear incentive to take actions let themselves be led by those who have by those who have it almost without asking any questions. This notion is both interesting and concerning to me. Not that it's anything new, of course. We have observed many examples of this happening throughout history. I just do not grasp of how few people would actually be able to impose actions into reality. Knowing this makes me wonder if our education system has considered developing these skills among their students. Honestly speaking, I know that this on itself is a huge task to ask, but the benefits are, in my opinion, worth the effort and the investment. For once, students will commit better to their education if they know how to do so. we will come with a bigger pool of initiatives. If we take into consideration that those acting are not necessarily the brightest or the more qualified, we could also tap into programs directed by more appropriate individuals, and the competition coming from it will impulse our communities to become better to some extent. My writing today also allude to those who claim themselves to be leaders. In my opinion, leaders should encourage others to be capable individuals and recognize their own potential. If somehow we can work with others so they adapt and propel our society to a better path, will not that be the right action to take? Throughout my engagement with this community, I can see that we have many incredible commitment cultivators, and I would love for us to start seeking other successes, as their motivation can enhance our life experience and better tomorrow's generations. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Fernando. Yeah, very thought-provoking stuff. Yeah, I appreciate the reflection and the attention you're giving to your own motivations and the motivations of those around you. It's very much of a piece with the initial part of Christina's presentation, cultivating this kind of maturity. I mean, maybe cultivating commitments, rational ones, is something along the lines of Kantian maturity. I'm back. So yeah, I guess I want to open it up to other people and hear what they have to say, because I mean, you're making some observations, some kind of critical observations. For example, you're noticing a lack of commitment, stick-to-itiveness in people in our society, and maybe those around you, your more immediate society. I mean, I guess this gives rise to the question, on the one hand, is the lack of commitment, or it's not the lack of commitment, it seems like you're saying, it's more like you're saying almost an unwillingness to honor a commitment, something like that, or maybe an inability due to not being sort of taught that, which is something else I think you alluded to. But is that not, I suppose, the same thing as again what Kant was getting at there, which is no, I mean, at a certain point you have to overcome maybe the external influences. I can't remember the exact word you had, external motivators.
Yeah, temporary external influencers, yes.
Yeah, that's what it is. Temporarily external influencers. I like that. I like that as a term. I don't know if you coined it, but it's good.
I coined it actually. I didn't look into anything. But yes, but this is the thing. Like, I see that, for example, some people want to be motivated, and their source of motivation seems to go to like videos or books, so they can be motivated by others to do something. The issue with it is that like that lasts just a specific time. They can give like 5 minutes, maybe a day, and that is like your motivation lasts that. And if you depend on somebody else to be motivated, you are like, that person will tell you what to do. But if we're able to somehow teach like how to, so you can tap in your own motivation, like your own actions are driven by yourself. So you're not like, even if you're in this current pandemic, like you don't necessarily need to be like outside. Like as long as you know how to stay engaged and be committed to a specific goal and just focus on it, like you can do something. Part of what has been my experience this year in Dallas College has been that even in the leadership positions, I didn't apply to them. It's just like I was one of the few students who were active, and it's like, we need this position. Phil, do you want it? It's like, sure. So like I keep saying yes, 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 because no one was there. And then like the action that was being driven was really just me. And like I didn't even tap into it. It came to me. While others were saying no, or like eventually they said, maybe this is too much, and they resigned their position like eventually. And again, I was there. So I just could continue things. So I don't necessarily see it bad, for example, personally, because yes, I get to experience all these things. I get to explore different aspects of, like, it does enrich me as a human being, like as an individual. But as a whole, it is bad, because like their experiences are starting to depend on one individual or very few individuals. And like, first, that doesn't really give me anything to compare. I cannot see other people's work, so I can kind of like adjust my transition. So like it even limits me, my experience as a leader, a lot, because I don't have anybody else who is kind of like challenging me and making me see like, okay, this could be a mistake, this could be proper, like like it limits the potential. And I think like if we are so claiming to be society oriented, or at the least an institution, if you're just throwing materials but you're not teaching how the students can be focused on these materials, how much are you gaining? Like, I make a joke, and like, I'm pretty sure that homework is doing the trick, but it isn't, because students are not doing their homework. They sometimes don't even see why they should have to do like a math thing if they want to go into like maybe English. So it's like what are you teaching them, how to be engaged with your classes? Because if they're engaged with their classes, they're going to take more of it, and they can have the initiative of trying to see how they can take advantage of those learning. But otherwise, you're just wasting the teacher's time, the student time, money even sometimes, and they're going to have to like relearn those subjects later when they know how to be motivated and actually pay attention to the teaching. I mean, just a thought.
Hey, I had
Yeah,
to be.
no,
I hate to be the one to cut the discussion short, but I do believe we have another presentation in line, and we are 4 minutes past into it. So, Obi, whenever you're ready for the presentation, go for it.
well, yeah, let me give him a proper introduction here. So yeah, Ifani John Obi. He's been here for almost the entire conference, or maybe the entire conference. So thank you for your attendance. And also, just really quick, Fernando, yeah, I do like what you're saying. I might qualify quickly by saying, I don't know if it would be a complete waste of time, because once one makes a commitment and makes the commitment to cultivate commitments, maybe one can look back in the prior experience and sort of take something from it. But again, that will depend on whether or not they've been paying attention to the fleeting moments. All right, at any rate, yeah, so the next presentation is titled Social Atonement and Forgiveness, a dive into cancel culture and public interest. Again, a very intriguing title. So yeah, without further ado, feel free to begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Really quickly before I share my screen, I'm going to make a couple statements here, things that I believe, and I just want everybody, like all like 20 of us, including the professors, to just type in the chat how they feel or how my statements make them feel. The first one is all lives matter. The second one is not all cops are bad. The third one is obesity is bad. Okay, those are my three statements. True beliefs. I really believe these things. I just want everyone to just type how they feel about that really quickly while I start sharing my screen here.
I'm going to do my best to participate. I've been having trouble all day with the chat. That's why I haven't been in the chat really. But I encourage everybody who has access to the chat to participate.
Yeah, I can't see the chat, so I really hope people are saying things.
We are. I mean, I wrote curious. Courtney said she feels like it's controversial statements there, but yeah. Eva said intrigue.
Yeah. Does it make you mad? Do you agree with me? Things of that nature. Let me set a timer for myself here so I don't go overboard.
John is saying he feels like he's trying to understand your definition of true beliefs. Courtney said partially agree and partially disagree.
I'll start and then we'll get to that in a second here. So the title of my presentation is Social Atonement and Forgiveness, a dive into cancel culture and public interest. So with this topic, we have to first of all define what canceling someone is. So I define it as the deplatforming or segregation or even shunning of someone or something who has done or said something that people believe or perceive to be problematic. So there are a few simple questions that I said needed to be answered on this topic. Firstly, is there a culture of cancellation in our society? That's the first question we have to answer. The second question would be, should people be canceled? And if so, when? And lastly, we must determine if this culture of cancellation has a net positive or a net negative on society. Those are three questions that we have to answer really quickly here. So the first question I said is easily answered. if I were to, so this is where if I were to write a homophobic slur on this paper and I showed it to a group of people, what would be their response? I said I guarantee they would not like me very much, right? So Agnes Callard, she gives us a sufficient answer to our question of, is there a culture of cancellation? She discusses how in our current society, messaging has been read into literal words. So like I said all lives matter. And I'm pretty sure some people in here were like, what is he even talking about? The thing is, all lives matter is a true statement. All lives do matter. I don't think anybody disagrees with that statement. But because of the current atmosphere, the political atmosphere that we live in currently, those words now have alternative meanings. You know, we no longer believe that anybody just means what they say. They always have to have some ulterior motive behind the words that they say, right? So I said, perceived undertones or messaging have been the root cause of many cancellations. Take, for example, if I were to write the words Black Lives Matter, you would immediately assume that I was more liberal, you know, I was interested in activism, maybe even call me a socialist, right? So we know that Black lives matter, like Black lives do matter. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But just me saying those words, you immediately put meaning behind the words, even when I did not express any views that you think I do. So if we decide people should not have a platform at all so hastily based on what we think they mean, then we have a cancel culture. So our first question is answered. So Professor Callard in her article, she gives us some assistance in our second question. We have to differentiate between canceling historical figures and canceling public figures, current public figures, right? She asserts that we should remove inferred messaging from statements and view them literally, right? So I said, as an alien with no knowledge of the political atmosphere, right? So if an alien were to come down here and you were to say to them, not all cops are bad, I'm pretty sure they would agree with you. But because we in our society right now, we know what those words mean and you know how they are used, so we ultimately assume that that person that's saying that is probably racist, right? So with this method, if we use this method that she talked about, viewing words literally when it comes to historical figures, we can see that Adolf Hitler deserves to be canceled because if we read his statements literally, saying something like kill the Jews, that should be canceled. That type of view should not be given a platform. So that method works, right? And I believe that it works for historical figures because we are so separated from them that it's possible to remove the messaging from their statements. So what about our current public figures? I believe that if you use a utilitarian / consequentialist philosophical theory, that we can have an easy course of action when it comes to canceling people, right? So consequentialism places an emphasis on the consequences of our actions as the way to determine if they are right or wrong. So we must determine if the cancellation of a current public figure or anyone currently is optimific, right? To be optimific, the cancellation must yield the best result for the greatest amount of people, right? If we fuse this with the utilitarian approach, then we have a clear course of action on when to cancel someone. So we must ask ourselves, will society's canceling an individual lead to the best outcome for the most people? If so, then the cancellation is right. So take Richard Spencer. I know some of us know Richard Spencer. Let me see. Richard Spencer here, right? Richard Spencer is a racist provocateur. So his cancellation would be a net positive because taking him, deplatforming him, ostracizing him makes the public a better place because his views, they're used by racists and I mean, just horrible people, right? So another example would be Kyle Kashuv. He's a right-wing pundit, right? He was canceled recently, or like a couple years ago, actually, because he used a racial slur. I don't know if you can see all of this right here. He used those racial slurs, so Harvard rescinded their admission of him. So in my paper, I discussed it, and I said, was his cancellation optimific? Well, it had tremendous toll on, because he had a toll on his mental health. His ability to take care of his family had been limited, and you know all those things. But what he did Was it wrong? Yes. But I said, would it not have been optimistic if he were reprimanded, learned from his mistakes, and could move on and maybe even educate others because he has a large following? So I saw this tweet. I said, there's just something unsustainable about an environment that demands constant atonement, but actively disdains the very idea of forgiveness, right? So let's define atonement. Atonement is a reparation for a wrongdoing, right? And what goes along with reparation is forgiveness. But in our current society, when we cancel someone, that's it. They're done. There's no coming back. But the very idea of cancel culture is atonement, but we leave out the forgiveness part, right? So canceling someone takes away the option for them to learn from their mistakes. So while I agree with the sentiment, I believe allowing someone to learn from their mistakes only applies where canceling someone or something is not optimistic. So what that means is if it's not in the best interest of the public for someone to be canceled, then they should be allowed to atone for their wrongdoing, right? If it yields the best result to cancel someone, then social cancellation is the goal and not social atonement. So I made a distinction between cancellation and atonement. When you cancel someone, they're done. But when it's an atonement, then they are trying to pay for the wrongdoing that they've done and be forgiven. It's prudent for us to refrain from canceling people when it does not yield the best result in the interest of the public, right? So if it's not going to be in the interest of everyone to cancel someone, then there really is no reason to. They should be given a path to come back to the fold of society, right? So our last question is cancel culture net positive or net negative, right? I said to know if canceling people has a positive or negative impact on society, we must discuss whether it yields the best outcome for the greatest amount of people. So I said, I believe that cancel culture, and this is important, when done in a manner that seeks out cancellation only when it is optimistic, can be nothing but a net positive. The reason for this is because if we only cancel people because it is optimistic to do so, it will always yield positive outcomes. As I stated to you earlier, reducing canceling people to only when it is in the best interest of the public and the best outcome leads to a more effective and positive cancel culture. Thank you. So, I have a minute left, so I have like 6 minutes for questions, if anybody has any.
Well, I mean, we're about of your time, but I gotta tell you, I appreciate that presentation. I especially appreciate that you made in your essay. I will say this too. This idea of, I suppose, atonement and sort of what justifies an atonement. It sort of reminds me of the idea of intention. So, I mean, on some level, perhaps the standard by which we judge cancellation as optimistic or not, at least on some level, has to do with, and I'm seeing it a little bit in the comments here. Every time I try to type my own, Teams crashes on my iPad, but some people are bringing up context is important and things like that. I think that's your very point. What I really appreciate is we've had several presentations prior to yours that take abstract ethical theories and place them in concrete circumstances. And most of that was virtue ethics and Aristotle. And then we got that with Kant, with Professor Hunsinger. So this was like a really interesting, appropriation of conceptual appropriation of consequentialism as it plays itself out in a very widespread phenomenon, something that seems to be pervading everything. Most especially, I would say, the arts. But yeah, I just wanted to comment on that and give you a little bit of feedback there. Yeah, very, very nuanced essay, I thought.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that'll take us to our final presentation, and it's a joint presentation. So I want to make sure they have a little bit of time here to set up. We have Amanda Fumero and Sofia Vasquez, and they are presenting on intellectual humility. Intellectual humility.
Hi.
Hey.
The other interround is having a little bit of problems to log in. So please, that we're just like having 5 minutes, so see if she can log in with her phone. If not, I will do the presentation by myself.
No, we can give you a few minutes. Yeah, maybe one of the philosophy club officers can help her out with logging in. And in the meantime, we could have a couple minutes more for discussion of the previous presentation. What about this?
Hey, I did. In the meantime, while we're getting ready, I did have a question for Obi. You don't have to respond. You can send it in the chat or a private message, whatever. But what you were mentioning took me to what's his name, Diogenes, all the way back to Plato and Diogenes, and I was discussing this with Professor Manzi like a couple of weeks ago, where he was socially canceled, quote unquote, in modern terms. Why? Because his philosophy did not fit well with the philosophy of that time. So my favorite event from that time is when Plato was in a class and he was telling that, oh, a man is nothing but a featherless biped. Diogenes comes barging in with a plucked chicken, a naked plucked chicken, and called it, "Behold, I bring to you Plato's man." And since then, it was just a huge water slide downhill for him. And your presentation just brought that to me, and it did make me laugh. So good job on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Socrates was canceled. If you want to put it like that. But no, and again, I do want to return to this idea again of optimistic, yeah, I mean, perhaps the problem becomes different people or different groups of people will disagree on what is quote unquote optimistic. And so if that is the case, if we can't come to any general consensus of what positive consequences are versus maybe harmful consequences, that's where things become a little entangled. Yeah, thank you, John. I can never resist any joke whatsoever, especially the joke that is my life. Yeah, I do think that on the other hand, it's still a good measuring stick to judge whether or not something as widespread as cancel culture is, entirely beneficial, or if it's beneficial if, executed properly. And again, to your point, I think the key is the same society that shuns or cancels somebody has to also be the society that is willing to forgive. Yeah. So maybe we can cultivate the commitment of forgiveness. How's it going, Amanda?
Okay, she's trying to log into her phone. But maybe I can just start and see if she can join. I should let her know.
Okay, yeah. Why don't you begin, and then yeah, if she can get in here, that'll be good.
Okay, I should let her know. I will start sharing my presentation.
Okay. And yeah, as Amanda is getting set up, I'll just say again, I mean, we've reached almost the end of the conference. It began at 10 a.m. We're approaching 3 o'clock. And then the 3 o'clock is going to be the Philosophy Club meeting. That's how we will end the conference. Every week, every Tuesday, rather, we meet 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And so it's no different today. Just there's, 4.5 hours of philosophy beforehand, which is awesome. So please stick around for that. The topic is art and politics. I'm sorry. The topic is art and culture. Art and politics is next week. So please stick around for that. And to everybody who's participated, attended, thank you so much for coming. Again, this is my favorite day of the semester. It's my favorite thing. So it's great to see such an outstanding turnout and sensational presentations. Just such student inspiration. It inspires me, and I know it inspires my fellow faculty and the guest speakers as well. So yeah, thank you for everybody. To everybody who come.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Okay, so unfortunately, Sophia is not here in this moment, but today we're going to present the concept of intellectual humility, a concept relevant to some epistemologies. Before starting, I want to do a little concept of what is going to be our presentation. Our presentation demonstrates an application of virtual epistemology to make sense of students' reaction to new course. Virtual epistemology is concerned with how our character influence our beliefs and attitudes about our own knowledge and the knowledge of others. This is according to Dr. Suso Carrillo, professor at Dallas College.
Oh, just not to interrupt. It looks like Sophia made it. I think she's here.
Yes. Sorry for the delay. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Glad you made it.
Thank you. Okay, the outline for this presentation is show a video and ask questions about the characters in the video, present definition and important points about the main concept, that is intellectual humility. Analyze the video using the definition for the main concept, intellectual humility, and finally, we will present a personal example of us reflecting intellectual humility.
Our video will have a contest of two students that are talking about a reading assignment. The two characters are June and Belle. Before playing the video, we want you to focus on these two questions. How would you describe June's mindset about ethics, and how would you describe Belle's mindset about ethics? We will stop sharing to share the video for a moment. Please wait a moment to see. There's something happening with the video. Can you all see the video?
Yep.
Okay, that's good.
Did you share the sound? You have also to share the sound.
Wait.
Oh yeah, there should be something. Yeah, share with audio.
No, it doesn't say.
Yes, it says. You have two ways. One, you kind of like, there you go. Well, I think you have it there. I don't know. Anyways, you can just remove the sharing and try to share again. But whenever you try to share, like it says include computer sound. You have to activate that. And it's right on the top left of the desktop part of this, like the share system. I don't know if you can see it. It says desktop, window, whiteboard, PowerPoint. Like above that, there is an option that says include computer sound.
Let me see. Because it doesn't show.
But you should see it before sharing.
No, it doesn't say.
It should. Are you? What email are you using?
It says browse, PowerPoint, screen share, white browse, but it doesn't say.
Okay, what about this? Send me the link of the video and I share it for you.
Okay.
Okay, something. Ooh, that link is huge.
I don't know why it shows like that.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, let me go there. Okay, give me a second so the video kind of like do not, yeah, it's gonna go into publicity, I'm assuming. Oh, actually, no. Okay, good. I'm gonna share my screen and you let me know whenever you're ready. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
God, this book is so cool. Do you saw all the philosopher and stuff that we're going to cover what we read for today? This really makes me want to learn more about my moral compass.
I am not drinking that Kool-Aid.
Huh?
I already know my moral compass. I don't need nobody to enlighten me with things that I already know.
Did you even do the reading?
You haven't heard a single thing that I have said.
Thank you. Now we will come back to our presentation. So now we are going to take, if anyone wants to share the answer to the questions that we did before. You may also do it in chat if you don't want to speak up.
Excuse me, did you ask a question? Like I couldn't hear properly.
Yeah, the questions that we did before playing the video, we will take some answers of those questions to those questions if anyone wants to volunteer.
And so just to reiterate, the question was,
How
Sorry,
would you before playing the video with this question, how would you describe your mindset about ethics, and how would you describe Bell's mindset about ethics? June, how would you see the PowerPoint is the girl from the left, and Belle was the girl from the right.
yeah, feel free, everybody, to respond in the chat. And if you want to watch the video again, it's in the chat as well. You can click on the link.
Okay, I mean, if you need a volunteer, I can volunteer. I hear it again just in case I miss something. Okay, should I just respond to the questions in front of me?
Yes, you may
Okay.
decide which one you want to respond.
All right. June was due. Okay, so and June is the month I was born. So I'm gonna start with that person. I think that person mindset about ethics is, I would describe it as curiosity and kind of like willing to learn from others. While mindset from Belle is like, why would she learn from somebody when that person is not herself? She's more kind of like I will say Belle is more of a person that likes to learn of her own mistakes and actions, and she doesn't, I guess, she's not open to anybody else saying something when that person was not living her life. But June sees other experiences and trying to learn from them. That's how I would like describe it.
Yeah, it actually, we will talk about some keywords that you mentioned. So if no one else wants, we will continue.
Well, yeah, I'll kind of second what Fernando said. It does seem like the character portrayed by Amanda had sort of an open mindset. So yeah, that would be June. And then
Yeah.
Belle seemed more of a closed mindset, to put it in that, to use those terms.
Okay.
When it comes,
Excuse me.
oh, specifically when it comes to ethics. So, or in this case, yeah, philosophy.
Okay, let's continue.
Okay, the main concept of this presentation is intellectual humility, which means being conscious of and rarely admitting the limits of one's own knowledge. Someone who reflects intellectual virtue is aware that he or she is ignorant, rarely admits that he or she is ignorant of or has unlimited knowledge about something, has some insight into how he or she came to form a belief about which he or she makes an absolute and strong claim, recognize there might be problems with a claim to know some particular thing, and to the idea remains open to the idea that one can learn from a variety of sources across a variety of contexts.
We now will do our own video analysis from the chapters of the book and the application of the concepts that we just mentioned. June is reflecting intellectual humility because she is showing an attitude where she's open to learn new things from the reading of the ethics class they are in. For example, when she says in the video, "That really makes me want to learn more about my moral compass," she is showing an interest to learn more about the reading in the book. Also, by saying this, she's indicating that she wants to learn more about her moral compass, and so she is admitting the limits of her knowledge. This shows that she wants to expand her knowledge of her moral compass.
On the other hand, Belle is not reflecting intellectual humility. She expressed an attitude of intellectual arrogance when she said, "I already know my moral compass. I don't need nobody to enlighten me with things that I already know." She doesn't want to admit her limited knowledge and her ignorance. By ignorant, we mean that she is not aware of something. There is always something that you don't know you don't know. Belle is the opposite of being open. She shows that she is being close-minded to the new ideas from the ethics book.
From last, we will read some personal examples where we did reflect intellectual humility in our lives. For me, there was one time where my family and I were at a party with the friends of my parents. Most of them were older than me, and they started to play music from the times when they were young. One of them asked me if I recognized the song that was being played at that moment, and I told him no. I admitted the limits of knowledge about the music they were enjoying. I told a friend I did not recognize most of those songs. I continued to listen to their music while they also explained the history of the singers and the records associated with each one of the songs we were listening to. I kept myself open to learn more about this music that I have never been exposed to. At the end of the party, I came home with a lot of new songs in my mind that I had learned about thanks to them.
On my personal example is when I started my fitness journey, I had to learn new topics by myself. After reading some articles, I thought that I already knew everything about the fitness journey until I met new people that had more years into their own journeys. A lot of the things that I had learned were not true, meaning my knowledge was limited. People I talked to told me about the reality of fitness and how getting fit was not as easy as I had thought. I was upset that some of my investigations were a failure, but I recognized that it's never too late to learn more. To learn more, I'm so sorry, but I can't see the screen, so it's been hard to me. I decided to be open-minded with that people that I decided to be more open-minded with the people had to say to me. Thanks to the people I talked to, I was able to acquire new knowledge. I was able to acquire new knowledge about getting fit. So this ends our presentations. If you have any questions or something to say, just let us know.
All right, well, thank you so much, Amanda and Sophia. Intellectual humility, it's a really important, not just concept, but attitude and or mindset, as you called it. So yeah, I think it deserves promotion, and I like that we're discussing. I like that we're ending, frankly, on intellectual humility at a philosophy conference, where we're celebrating these really abstract ways of thinking, which takes intellectual depth and perseverance, but also humility, as your presentation taught us. So thank you all so much for that. And yeah, that concludes the presentation portion of the conference, which kicked off at, again, 10 a.m. today. As I said right before this most recent presentation, a big shout out to everybody who attended, who told people about it, who presented, of course, and who posed questions both out loud and in the chat. Again, just a great day for philosophy here in Dallas, here the Dallas College community. Having said that, we will now transition to the informal aspect of the conference, which is the Philosophy Club weekly meeting. Today's topic is art and culture. Again, we're continuing our final and fourth monthly theme of the semester, which is art. We talked about art and beauty last time. Now we're talking about art and culture. Next week will be art and politics. And then the final meeting of the semester taking place during finals week, May 11th, Tuesday, 3 p.m. It's an open topic on art and potentially a collaboration with an art club. We will see what happens. At any rate,
Nancy,
yeah.
one thing. That's all good enough, but allow me to stop the recording and have a different recording so we have a difference between the normal weekly meeting and the conference.
Honestly, I think we let it ride because we kind of let it ride last year, and I want the meeting to be a cohesive part of the conference,
Okay.
even if we separate it on the playlist. But I thank you for bringing that up.
All right, and I think we do have a couple of the art club officers here, so that's good. All right. Yes. Okay, good stuff. Now, thank you again, as Nancy said, for all your topics. It was very insightful, and well, we have 5 hours of a treaty, but we're missing like what, 2 more hours maybe. Let's try to have more time than the previous semester. But all right, we're gonna. Some of you already know how the drill goes, but for those who are not here, again, my name is Fernando, and alongside Orlando and Yusha, we are your officers for today's meeting. We're just here to ensure that the conversation goes smoothly and to kind of like present our resources and also the house rules. So when it comes to house rules, we normally goes, and some of you already have seen an example of it. I'm pretty sure that Yusha is working on it as I speak. Just write an exclamation mark on the chat. That way, we know who is going to be speaking first and who's going to be speaking next, and so on. As much as I would like to see all your hands raising, it is hard to know who is raising it first when the conversation gets heated. So just please refer to the chat. If you want to add some things here and there to some of the comments, that's fine, but just be aware of the queue, because sometimes we really go above and beyond, and some people even forget what they were supposed to say. As usual, try to check us on social media. We tend to be very active on it. We have website, we have YouTube, we have Instagram, we have everything. We do our best to submit all those information weekly. And of course, be expecting this video to be in YouTube. So if you want to be automatically famous, just activate your camera and you're already famous. I'm telling you, for prosperity. Yes, I'm not. Well, I think Nancy already did the announcement as you usually do. So I'm just gonna go straight into the whole message. I know Yusha is an example. I just don't know if Nancy is actually an example. He's actually trying to kick off the conversation. But he did say what the topic of today is, which is art and culture. Can all forms of art shape or deepen a culture? Philosophically speaking, of course. So if someone wants to start the conversation, feel free to just write exclamation mark. Otherwise, I mean, I don't mind being me, the first person speaking. So going once. Going twice. This is a moment for Mansi to kind of see if you were actually trying to speak first. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll speak. I'm happy that we have some members of the art club here. That's really cool. Feel free to speak up, of course, but don't feel like you have to. But yeah, I wanted to kind of throw this out there as a way of getting started. Again, what is just a really broad question? What is the relationship between art and culture? Are they completely identical in the sense that everything one does, there's an art or technique to it? Or are we talking, again, more specifically, art proper? So the field of art, fine art, performance arts, things along those lines. I wonder, to what extent you can even disentangle them. Because again, on the one hand, they don't seem like they're completely identical, but it does seem as though, oh, thanks. Daphne, my former student. Everything is art. Okay, well, we can talk about that. That's kind of the question I had here. Is everything art? Or, because when we came up with this topic, we meant specifically like works of art or just movements in art history, perhaps, and seeing the cultural impact it may have had. So you think of the Renaissance, for example, in the West. But I guess on an even more individual level, how do you relate to your own culture? Maybe especially initially, is it through artistic expressions and renderings that help you understand important aspects of your culture and where you come from? Or is it the other way around? Maybe you need to figure out exactly what your cultural values are before you can cultivate aesthetic sensibilities or artistic tastes. But yeah, Daphne, please feel free to elaborate.
We actually were just discussing Da Vinci and his abilities, not just as an artist, but as a creator to make things. And personally, I believe everything is art. Anything from architecture to design, and everything you have around you is art.
Is it all good art?
I think it would depend on the person that it's being applied to. Everyone has their own specifics about what they would maybe prefer around them, and maybe in that sense, yes.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because again, when you think of something like art, you think of something like technique. This is what makes the artist. Now, if everything around us is art, and everything that we come into contact with, or maybe form or just impact, if that's all a form of art, then are we all artists? And if we're all artists, what does that say about the professional artist?
I do agree with that. That's actually something we talk about frequently in the art club. Is we have people that come in and don't believe they're artists, but in my opinion, everyone is an artist. If you create or do anything, that's your form of art. So yeah, personally, I agree. Everyone is an artist, even if they don't think so.
I feel the same way.
I wanted to say a little bit about that because, especially the people who go to the professional art field, there is this moment when you're like, I don't know if I'm an artist or not. Even when you are like, you never feel good enough. Of course, it depends on the person. Some people have a lot of confidence on their artwork, but a lot of artists don't see themselves as having that label as good enough. Like even if you see their art and you're like, oh my God, it's amazing, they probably see it as something that they could do every day or something that it isn't good enough. So they don't see themselves as artists. And also talking about whether everything is art or not, there's a lot of who defines what art is. Like if we look back to some like the cave paintings, like we don't know if they consider that art or not, the people who made them, but we do they consider it as art. So it really depends on the shifting times and the opinions of different time frames on what is art and what is not. Like we're starting to see craft as art, especially like embroidery and whatnot, when they used to think of it as craft instead of art, and they used to make this divide. And right now there is this thought that craft is also a form of art form. So I think that's really interesting how it changes every now and then.
Yeah, but that is also something that we were connecting last meeting. I remember that we were focusing on the whole aspect that everything can be art as long as it
It's true.
carries meaning. Somebody spoke, but I'm not completely sure. Yes. So as like we were exploring the whole idea that anything that carries meaning can be art. So for example, like you don't necessarily have to be able to craft, you don't necessarily have to be able to paint. But for example, if whenever you speak or whenever you're like engaging with someone, you make sure that that experience in itself has some meaning. There's some art in it because you need to be able to really explore how to do so good, which I guess to some extent art you do have to put your soul into it so you can do it as not efficiently, as proper as possible. But well, the chat in the queue is starting to build up, and I think the next one is, and my computer is being a little bit slow right now, is Courtney. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the idea of what exactly art is. People define it in many different ways, and oh, this is art versus this is art versus like no, that's not art. It doesn't have quite enough. It's not good enough to be art, right? But one of the most interesting things I learned in my AP Art History class, we learned about the movement Dadaism, which Dadaism is basically art that isn't art. So like one of the most prominent Dadaist artists was Duchamp, I think that's how you say it. But he did like a piece, it was like oh, I forgot what it was called, but he basically just tied a shovel with a string to the ceiling and called it art. And the thing is, like, some people are like, is that art versus is it not art? And so even in just the art community, there is like a bunch of debate over exactly how you define art and what it is.
Yeah, that's a very good observation. And I'm pretty sure that our next speaker, Orlando, will put some salt in it. It's going to steal some of those comments there.
So,
Copycat.
get a little bit away from the definition of art and more towards like culture as well, and how the two kind of are intertwined. When I thought about this topic in terms of culture, it's like I thought about Japan, and maybe like anime and also manga, and how basically World War II and the aftermath of that, is when manga kind of came to prominence. And you had these like really in-depth stories about people who were going through these tragedies, who were going through these conflicts, who were playing the role as losers, who were coming as losers, but trying to, overcome that. And you can kind of see that was like a sort of a societal attitude because of World War II, because of the tragedy. And it's kind of interesting to see how like the culture or the society affects the art that's in the present time. Other movements like that I would think of as like realism or the French New Wave, things like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Good. Okay. I see that Daphne has her hand raising, so I'm sure that she has a comment on it. I'm gonna just yes. Go ahead.
So no, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I am just trying to address a comment in the chat before. This is from Piers. Verushka. Hi, Verushka. So you're saying if it is to be thought of that way, could it be that translated to musicians? We're all musicians if we play any instrument or make music or sound? And I think, or George was addressing that, and I do have a specific example for it. There was one artist, which I don't remember the name, I'm so sorry, but he created a music which has no chord. He literally just sit there for 4 minutes, and then that's it. And the sound is not what he touches, but the noises that the people do. So he says that the pieces changes every time according to the audience, and it's considered music, and we have to study it and everything. So yeah, to your question. And I'm sorry that I interrupted. So Daphne, your floor.
So Barbara helped me. We actually discussed this at one point in the art club as a big part of our meeting was imposter syndrome, which is something a lot of people, not even just artists, have, but it is a general problem for artists when you don't think you're good enough to be an artist or what you're creating is a real creation. So that was all. I couldn't remember the word for it earlier, but I think that was generally what y'all were talking about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now Eva, you said didn't oh, that's a complicated way to read it. Something related to toilet too. I missed the context there. Okay, Yusha, you're next.
Thanks. Great discussion, guys. I mean, it's always interesting to see different people's take on something. So I wouldn't say controversial, but it's different for everyone, you know. And combining the two very different topics of art and philosophy, where everyone literally has their own ideology and lens and everything about it, it's very personal, right? And to make it so public, it's interesting to see. But for me, um, I look at the difference between the two. Philosophy is more about it's more about subject matter. It's concept. It's categories, right? And when you bring art into it, art, on the other hand, is very emotional. It's imaginative. It's about reflection. It's about finding yourself in it. So for me, it's a very difficult connection to make, because those of you who do know me, and those who don't, I am a very analytical person. I do good with numbers, statistics, facts, figures, and this imagination stuff is not for me at all. Like, no, that's just not me. I'm sorry, but when it comes to, I have studied art. I mean, just the previous meeting, if we take a look at it, I was criticizing that The Starry Night. I absolutely don't hate it, but I don't like it either, because it doesn't make sense to me. And I've met people who find themselves in the painting, right? They look at it and they're like, oh, okay, I understand it. This is where I stand, or this is me reflecting myself into the painting. But with philosophy, there's literal stuff. There isn't much that is abstract aside from the philosophy itself, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. I'm trying to make sense of something. And I heard someone say shovel hung up in the museum, and that reminded me of the banana duct tape art. So if this is what we're calling it, then is that considered art? Because I can go up, you know, take any piece of fruit and call it duct tape banana 2.0, maybe. Call it Rise of the Unknown Artist or something like that. So this is what I don't understand about art specifically is you know, you have to put this much time and effort into attempting to make something that others would attempt into understanding. So there's a lot of vagueness for me in it. And Manzi's like, what?
Yusha, you're on mute.
No, you are. I mean, it's your ears. I mean, I could get you hearing aids. I have a doctor for that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, I see what you're saying. But let me just ask you this, Yusha, and then I want to return to the queue. But because tying it back to culture, maybe this will help us understand art. And this came up earlier in the conference, as did a number of things. But we talked about at one point how when we're young, when we're children, we're very impressionable. You know, people will refer to themselves as creatures of habit. But where do those habits first form? Typically in one's very young years. So, for example, I mean, where does one learn right from wrong at first? Typically from the representatives of one's culture. So one's family, one's friends, one's environment, perhaps the media. So you learn things like right and wrong. What about things like, again, good art and bad art, or without even using the term art, things that you find to be beautiful in the world, at museums, in nature, versus things that, as you said, you don't love Starry Night, but you don't hate it either. It's kind of just neutral. Perhaps we first learn our aesthetic sensibilities by how they're taught to us through our culture. Not just what is beautiful, but why it's beautiful. And so maybe that's the beginning of art.
No, yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's not like I don't understand beauty and stuff at all, because I do. And if you look at my photography portfolio, a lot of it is stuff that is surreal, like you've never seen it before. Like How many photographers do you know that have actually captured a lightning hitting a volcano at the exact same time? And I'm one of those few photographers who has. I have a lot of astrophotography in my portfolio, so it's not like I don't understand it. It hits me very differently. Like my art professor was like, "Okay, you are not a very good art person," and I'm like, "What? Just look at my portfolio. You know that I am an artist." And if you look at my cars, the ones that I use for drag racing or drifting for that matter, to me, I consider them art because of the amount of time, finance, skill, and everything that I put into it. If you look at art's definition, they fit it perfectly. So I do consider myself an artist, just not your mainstream generic artist.
Okay, yeah, and it goes back to what Barbara was saying about craft. So, I mean, if you go all the way back to the roots of ancient philosophy in the West, the term techne, especially written by Aristotle, it's where we get the term technique from. And Aristotle was talking about how art is basically a craft. It's craftsmanship. It's how to execute abilities that you've cultivated. And so, for example, again, you understand how to photograph well. That wasn't something you were born with. It's something that you chose to cultivate, chose to habituate yourself to, and refine your skills at, because you find something aesthetically pleasing about, I guess, a lightning bolt hitting a volcano, which does sound pretty awesome. But yeah, I'm sorry. Let's get back to the queue. I see it's continuing to expand here.
Yeah, so rude, Nancy. So rude. Just trying to take, the spotlight out of the students, and you claim to be a good advisor. Good Lord. Anyways, no, exactly. I'm just pointing that out. He's not. We're looking for substitutions. Just saying. Just kidding. You're good. You're good. You're good. So, Osita, he is replying to Verushka saying that if you were sincerely trying to make music, then yes, that will be art, just not a very good musician. Just saying. And now we have Courtney. You're up.
I believe it was Daphne, yes, who said something about, art and imposter syndrome and people not feeling like their creations are good enough. And when she referred to it as creations, using that exact word, creations, it made me think of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster was a creation from Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein put in time and effort and work to create his monster. Yes, but would we consider Frankenstein's monster art? Did he create art there when he created Frankenstein's monster? When he created this being, when he created this life, would we consider it art? The thing about saying that it requires effort and work and time is a lot of different things require effort and work and time. That's all I wanted to say, because that comment really just sparked that whole thing of, creation. I created this,
Okay.
Hey,
Good creation out there.
I'll put some pushback on it because I believe it was Descartes who said that whatever you create becomes yourself. For example, like if I create a chair, that chair is an extension of me and I am that chair. So I feel like this goes for a lot of artists. Like if you create something and you put yourself into it, so it kind of becomes who you are. So Courtney, I believe, yes, it will be considered, I would consider it art. Hey, if I'm creating life, back when it was old technology, I mean, it was archaic. And if I'm creating life at that time, I would consider it art, yeah.
Okay, good stuff. But you got me in the first half. Since you said you're going to push back, it's like, oh, you're going to do a counter argument, but no, it was a following up. Okay, good stuff. Okay,
No,
so now.
I agree with the Frankenstein part, but the Descartes part, that was a pushback, that you do put yourself into it. The art, in my opinion, at least, I agree with Descartes when he says that it is your extension. So your creation is yourself.
Okay, I see. But now going back into the queue, next up, I see Barbara's comment, so if you're interested, there is a link for you. She's saying, on the topic of music, this video that explores how sound can be music is by the art assignment. So there is some art assignment there. It's a YouTube, so you're interested, there is a link there. Then we have John, who is saying, glad to hear someone else teasing Nancy. That's how we roll. That's what we do. It's our mission. So if you're for a treat today, that's a guaranteed. But now, George, the floor is yours.
First of all, as an aside, love the Frankenstein analogy question. I thought that was really cool. But when Manzi was talking about, the relationship between culture and art and kind of which informs which, and I'm going to say that they have a mutually supportive relationship where they feed off of each other. So you have your norms, your values, right? That's part of culture. So that gets transmitted to us when we are little. That influences what we see as beautiful and good and right. Okay, but then we turn around and we go and we create works of art that celebrates the good, the beautiful, and the right, and that has meaning that we communicate. Okay, so those works of art in turn shape the culture and influence the education that future generations receive and the values that they receive when they are young. So it's this feedback loop where, like I said, they support each other, they feed off of each other, they feed into each other. So I am sympathetic when Manzi said at the beginning of this, I'm not sure how much I can disentangle these two things. I'm of that mind as well. I think they are very much entangled, and of course, I think that's an okay thing.
Yes. All right. So, well, we have a couple of gifts. Very, very funny. One of those. Osita kind of exposing what is art for him, which is cars. And now the proper pronunciation of Frankenstein, which it seems to be Frankenstein. But yes, I would add a little bit more to the conversation. Kind of like trying to get it together to the whole premise of the question, which is, does art deepens our culture? And I mean, of course, so far the direction suggested yes, and I agree. For instance, there is for us to know how other people used to live, mostly were based on what they did as a culture, like their vestige, like whether like they were like in the caves, kind of like doing like whatever is it that they were doing. Like it is through art that we're able to tap into how they live, and it kind of like also speak on what they see either beautiful, what they see that is relevant in their society, what are their priorities, and so on. So I do believe that art does kind of like expand our perception of how our societies are run on itself. So yes, all it takes is if you want to learn somebody, you just learn the music and you see what could be an issue that they're facing. I'm pretty sure that there is a rise right now on, for example, the Black community complaining about the cops' injustice to themselves. Like the whole Black Lives Matters and all that stuff. So yeah, I think there is a huge source for us to tap into the culture of a society. But okay, Orlando, you're next.
I kind of want to go off of what you said there because I feel like that's really true. Like it kind of gives us a perspective that maybe we don't formally have. I consider cinema to be art. So if I'm watching a movie and I'm there to experience, situations that I would never have put myself in, I can maybe experience the killing of a person, being a criminal, being in jail. The same thing with books. It's like you're literally reading these descriptions of situations you would never put yourself in. So it's like, in a way, it's giving you this in-depth look into cultures and ideas that we just maybe will never have been, might never even be exposed to, and never have been exposed to. And I think it's the same thing with just like maybe even paintings. When I go to the art museum or something and I look at like a beautiful painting of like a sunrise, and just like, I just imagine being there. I can almost feel it from the visualization of it. So I think there's a lot of truth to what you said there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just that. Marcus is here. What? That's crazy. He said he deleted his social, so he doesn't know that something was posted. That was the topic. Oh, come on. You have an email too. We're talking about art and culture. I'm pretty sure that you have something interesting to say, but it's glad to have you here. And Asita, Uh, your comment says art is a society's culture. So but I cannot remember the name of the artist. What I do know is that there was one person. It was around the World War II. That part of the war like lavished the whole area that he lived, and most people were not completely able to comprehend the nature of this disaster. So what he did was like he wrote something like very big. It was a big drawing of like portraying how the whole scene was, and it was very grotesque and bloody, and it was like people when were seeing it, it was very impactful for them. And thanks to that art, many people start like really pushing back to the whole idea of continuing these battles, because even though they were not in the battlefield, they were seeing how like damaging it can be for people to be there. So yeah. And now Marcus, I'm looking forward to your comment. So yeah.
All right, cool. I wanted to think about how art has progressed, along with time, and how human art has progressed through time, because the art we see today isn't always the art that existed, okay, or it wasn't always the art that humans felt the urge to make, okay, or was even accessible. There's a little bird right here. Is he okay? What the fuck? Can y'all see him? Oh my gosh.
Marcus, focus.
I'm sorry, I got distracted. Is he
No,
okay?
it's
No,
okay.
don't worry, that part is clipped.
Okay.
That's part
Well,
of our
anyway,
trailer
okay.
for
So back to what I was
today's
saying.
video.
My point. Think about early humans. Okay, they're cavemen. Okay, they have no sense of like expression yet, or they're trying to figure it out. So the very first, like almost aspect you could say of art would probably be like drawings in the dirt, clay, or the cave drawings, etc. That's like I can't really think of anything. Does anyone else like have like an idea of something else that would have happened before that? Like an actual like expression of human art? I feel that as like the beginning of it, right? Is that agreed upon?
I mean, you could take it.
There's also
You
some
could take it to
cultures like
thought.
in Chinese that in art history that they mentioned that, but the first pictorial ones are the cave painting that you're mentioning.
Okay, bet. Because now we have so much free time and we have so much stuff around. There's other art available to us, and I remember reading an article about takeover of AI. So it's like, oh, what are humans going to do when AI can do everything? We slowly become artisans. Like, what if everyone just progresses to become an artisan as more and more things become not necessary for humans to do, and that's like art just becomes from caving to, man, that wasn't exactly what I wanted to say because I got distracted by the damn bird. But my point was that cave drawings came first, but then now it's like everything, and it makes me wonder what's the future then like, and yeah, thoughts on that? Someone
Can hey, I can sum that up. Can an AI be an artist? Could they ever simulate?
Yes, this is a great argument. That Sophia robot, she sold, her first drawing or whatever as an NFT, and it sold for freaking millions, which is so, in my professionally humble opinion, BS. Because
well,
I think we lost him. R.I.P.
I'm searching for network. It's like seeing a cow.
Hey, Marcus, you're breaking out.
Yeah, I was about to say, well, Marcus recovered his internet. It is funny how Orlando always managed to bring AI into the conversation, no matter what it is.
He brought it up first, so I was like, let me just.
Sure, you were the one asking the question.
That art that art piece that she made then and sold, do we think that it should be valued that high? So, like, if I recall correctly, I believe it was in the millions or like really close to it. Does that make sense? What do we think about that? Like, is that a value that we should be placing? Like, there's the shift of value here. I don't know if anyone else is like really sensing it, but I really like am noticing it, obviously, with like crypto and like all this other weird stuff going on right now. There's like seems to be a shift in like I think the placement of value that we have as like a species, we see ourselves investing and putting more and more value for things that really only exist in like the internet sphere, like don't physically exist, assets that don't, you know, aren't tangible, like Instagram photos. Man, we're really obsessed over that. Like tweets, we're really, you know, worried about that. We place a lot of value in these things. You know, they mean a lot to us. You know, and so we're shifting this value, and so now we're valuing Sophia's art piece at millions of dollars, and she's a robot. Like, whoa. Like, what if that robot dog that, you know, that Chicago or like the MIT facility made, what if it got a pencil on its legs and started doing something? That's AI making something. Is that art? It's just a different AI. What makes it that? You know, what is there a boundary that the AI crosses where its ability to like do stuff makes it, what's the meaning behind it though? That's the point of art, is what I'm getting to. Does the robot have any meaning put into what it's doing? It has no meaning applied to it. It is doing something according to like its decisions. It's just, I remember reading about it. It was really weird. Someone interrupt me, by the way. I'm just going.
Yes, I will interrupt you. Thank you for pointing that out, since we can fill a whole hour just with you. But you bring very, very interesting topics that I want to speak. However, since we still have some queue, I'm going to read that first. So first, and this is just like, this is not a written contract, but it's just so you know, every time there is a LOL, I have to read it. So yeah, Orlando said LOL. So LOL. Now, George, you were asking me to reread Osita's comments. I will reread it. Osita said, art is a society's culture, right? What would a culture look like without art? Sparta, the Borg. So there you go. I reread it. Now, then we have John suggesting what we all know already, that Marcus is here, so now it's a philosophy party. There you go. Daphne is agreeing. She said that she herself is art. I'm assuming it's the AI. Then we have Verushka, which is still hasn't spoken today. We're looking forward to your comment. You're still learning how to speak, so yay, encouragement over here. I'm pretty sure that you're gonna do great. So Verushka is saying, I think art can create art. It's just applied to so many things. And then Nancy. Go ahead, Nancy.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, again, great contributions. A lot of compelling stuff, Marcus. And honestly, let's indulge the AI question just briefly here, because again, today's topic, it's not just art; it's art's relationship to culture. And so, I wonder. I mean, we talked about techniques earlier, and so if you want to say become a really great painter, you have to acquire the technique, the skills that come with painting. So, you know, fine motor skills, things along these lines. I wonder if we can create a machine that could paint with the utmost precision, better than a human being ever could. And if they're producing the same kind of work, namely a painting, couldn't we say that AI potentially is just a far superior artist in terms of executing the technique or mastery of skills required to do something like, in this case, painting? Another angle to take would be this. If that is the case, well, getting back to culture, do robots have culture? And if we can call robots or AI artists without a culture, then maybe we can disentangle art from culture. But that might be a big leap.
There you go. Good question right there. Okay, but again, I'm gonna stay with the queue and then I'm gonna address it if needed. All right, but we have John. You're saying someone felt it was worth that much because they were willing to pay it. True. It's a reference of the millions of dollars that cost the painting that Marcus was referring to. Then there you go. We have Barbara. Barbara, you're next.
Oh, sorry on the AI question. And let me turn on my notification because I get a beep every time somebody writes in the chat.
Yeah, me too.
So on the AI question, there are two really nice examples about that. One that brings to mind is, I'm not sure if you guys know the portrait of a girl with a pearl earring, the one when she's like with a bandana and she's looking like that. and they made a copy of the. Sorry for the notifications. They made a copy of it, but with 3D printing. So in that way, it is made out of paint, and it is like an exact replica of the painting, except that it was not made by the artist. It was made by a computer, pretty much. Even though it looks the same, like the way that we give value to the painting that was not made by a computers. And sorry about the notification, guys. That is your guys'
Don't
fault.
worry,
Are
it's
talking
Yusha doing it
so
on purpose. It's just Yusha being Yusha. Just continue.
It is all the laws that is sounding right now, and I don't know how to turn it off. And the other example that I think about is there's this website called This Person Doesn't Exist, and it is an AI that makes collages photos based on like photos of real people, and they make like a new person, like a new photograph of someone that doesn't exist at all. And you just refresh and it appears a new person. And you will argue, is that art? I would say that somebody had to make that algorithm in the beginning. Like it isn't something that's coming out of nowhere. So the person who made the AI in the first place is in a way making art. And even though it doesn't show like something that has an end per se, like when you make a painting at one point it is over. Well, when you have an eye, like you can have custom art making in a way. So I think it is interesting how there are new algorithms that are made to make that sort of art in that way. So I'm gonna leave it at that and open for comments.
Yeah, just a quick
Just,
response.
yeah.
Just I have to get in there because I know you're going to respond quickly, Fernando. Yeah, just a quick response. You know, it's interesting that I mean, I suspected that such technology existed. So you know, that's not surprising. But what's surprising is, and I think this is a good insight. The true source of what might be considered machine-made art, because we could say, okay, the machine made the art, but we can't really call the machine an artist. The machine has no appreciation of its skills. The machine has no appreciation of the beauty of what it created. It's just a mechanism. It's a tool. So that would beg the question, well, if the machine's not the artist, but art is being created, well, then who's the artist? And to your point here, you're saying, well, it's the person who discovered the algorithm or created the algorithm. And that's fair enough, but that's kind of changing what we understand an artist to be in terms of like the domain of art. So now the technique, which was once, you know, learn how to paint properly, now the technique of being an artist is learning algorithms? Maybe.
Well, it could be, but I mean, it could be just a different manifestation of art. As far as we have been said in here, that there are many ways that you can approach art. In this case, this person may not be able to do the Mona Lisa, but he can create a machine that can do the Mona Lisa for him or her. So at the end of the day, it's still art. It's just that that person is having an external source of creating those techniques that that person doesn't possess. At least I'm seeing it. And I think Daphne wants to say something in that regard too.
I do. So speaking of AI, you guys know that there are animals that paint, right? Like monkeys and elephants especially are known. So that's a living being, human or not. So in that case, does that change the fact that it's still art, or does it take out the difference of it being AI or not?
Yeah,
Well,
and you can go further with it. And you can say, well, I mean, nature, whatever nature is, it's creating beautiful things. So can nature be an artist, quote unquote, if nature isn't any particular animal, rational or irrational? Yeah, I think that's the other side of the coin. That's a good point.
Well, hey, if you bring up animals that can paint, the elephants and monkeys, they're being forced to do that. Just here's the darker side of things. They don't naturally do it. So I would not consider it art because it's a trained behavior, and I'll touch up on it when my turn comes up.
Yeah, forced or taught. So you could teach someone
yeah.
to be an artist. If you hold their trunk and make them paint, fine, forced. But if they're taught, you can still be an artist if you're taught what to do, right?
But that
See,
does
they're
that make it
forcefully.
where you're only an artist if you're taught?
Not only, but if you are taught, it doesn't mean you're not an artist, is all I'm saying. It's okay to learn to do art. So in the case of these animals, they have to learn, but we could still call it art. I think that's fair.
Well, they don't have to learn. They're being forced because usually
Okay.
there's either a spiked
All
collar
right, but
or a nail behind the ear. So
I'm
it's
gonna
either
push
or.
a little bit. I'm gonna push a little bit because there's the thing. I understand the principle, but there are some of the most like amazing things that we have seen that have been created, forcing people into debt to create it, like the big Chinese like wall, like the pyramids, like that was created by enslaved that they literally throw bodies at it and say like bah, bah, and whenever we go there, what we do? We take pictures. Oh, this is so amazing! Oh my God! Yeah! And like the story behind it was like they forced people until death to do it. So even
Clip
if it
that.
is forced, even if it is forced, I think that there is so even sometime more meaningful way for us to call it art because I mean it is a manifestation of what people were enduring during those times. So it's kind of like okay, even though you're being forced, there is a part of you that was trying to be free that is creating that element. Um, but I'm going too into the abstract, and it could be too abstract right now. But yes, that's my intake in that regard. I will go into the queue. And now we have Verushka. She said, art holds value in accordance to its context as well. Huh? Kind of like matching what I was trying to say. You see, she's smart. She just has to speak a little bit more. You can do it. Hey. So, and now you said lol, lol, and lol. Hey, we continue moving on. Eva, you said, I don't think because someone will pay X amount for something, it automatically mean that that person believes it is worth that. I can think of plenty of things we pay far too much, but but we have no choice but to pay it, and so many things that may be very full of worth to us, but are of a low cost. And you said there is a machine that can 3D print an exact replica of any painting. Ooh, that's cool. All right. So then we have Mena. She said, I hope it is a she. It's no, it's a he. I don't know in this case. I think art is the expression of human creative skills or form of communication. Good. And next in the floor is Osita.
Yeah, well, actually, Barbara pretty much covered everything that I wanted to say regarding like the AI art. That's just merely an expression of like whoever programmed her or it, whatever you want to call it. That's pretty much it. But I did want to, I mean, if we're talking about art and culture, I mean, I would just like an example of like culture without art. Can that exist? And if not, then like why even separate them? But yeah.
And I think that's what Nancy was trying to propose with the whole notion of the AI. Like if we can actually have art without the culture, and he was addressing the whole thing is like if the AI cannot even understand what it's creating, it's just applying the techniques. There is no true culture in there. I mean, but I still feel like somebody had to teach the AI how to do those techniques. So in itself, there is some culture in it. Like it's just that that machine is not completely feeding it, but someone was feeding it for the machine in order to be able to be doing well. I guess that's how I take it. I don't know if that's the truth. It's just my thought on it. But yes. And then we have Marcus. He says, in terms of technique, yes. In terms of value and meaning being transferred from the artist to the art, no. And then we have George, which wants to say something about machine-made art.
Yeah, I was just going to throw my 2 cents on the question of can an artificial intelligence make art? And I think there's a few things that need to be involved in the creative process in order to call it a creative process, in order to call the product art. The first one, I think, is will. So whatever is making the art has to decide to do something. So like a printer prints out a beautiful nature photograph, right? You can't even say that the printer was forced to do that. it was an entirely mechanical process, circuits and so forth, and ink being sprayed onto paper. Literally no will whatsoever involved in that, no decision making at all. I think for the product to be art, there's got to be some kind of decision making, some kind of expression of will involved. So even the elephant, right, when it scrawls on the board or whatever, decides to do that. Or even if in Fernando's example, the Great Wall of China, the people who were forced to work on that wall still had will. It was being dominated by somebody else. They were being like held at spear point, so to say. But they still had will. They were still people who decided, okay, I'd rather build the wall than just get executed right now. There's not even that with the printer. So there's got to be will involved. I think another aspect Manzi hinted at, some kind of appreciation for beauty or some kind of reflection has to happen on the inside, right? There's some element of I'm having an experience and I'm chewing on that in my soul, or I'm chewing on that in my mind or in my emotions, right? And there's going to be some output from that. Can an AI do that? I really, really don't know. I think that's a great question. And the third one is there has to be some kind of awareness that there may be meaning attached to the output. So again, when we take a picture or we paint a picture, we're aware that there might be meaning attached to that. We might be making a statement. Or if I make a sculpture or literally any other kind of art, there may be meaning that might be attached to that, and we're aware of that while we're creating it. Again, if the AI isn't aware of that going on, isn't aware that it's making something meaningful, I don't know that you can call it an artist. If it can't make decisions on its own, if it can't reflect in its own mind, its own spirit about what it's doing or appreciate meaning, I don't know if you can call it an artist. If the AI can do those things, then yeah, maybe. And then maybe in that case, you'd be wrong to say it's whoever programmed the AI that's the real artist. Or maybe you wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah, and you also you also bring something up, at least in my thought, which is like maybe, for example, like part of being an artist also comes with some sort of like free will, like if you don't design the AI to do art and the AI decide to do art because that's what the AI wants to do, and just by like his own motivation creates the thing, like then I agree with you. Like nobody programmed just to do art, the AI is deciding to do so. So I guess in some degree it is involved with some sort of like free will. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If the AI is able to make a decision, I'm going to make something, and it's able to reflect on what it experiences and like kind of creatively come up with something, sure, call it an artist. Otherwise, it's just a fancy printer that's mechanically outputting something based on inputs in a very rigid way, not in a creative way.
Okay, good. Before giving the floor to you, Shel, let me get out of this of the way. Lol, lol, lol. Haha. There you go. So now it's Yusha and then Orlando.
Okay, so first, George, great discussion, great point of view. But I wish it were that easy because Orlando, you might be able to back me up on this because artificial intelligence, at least in modern times, does think for itself. So when we program a robot to do something, especially in terms of artificial intelligence, we call it a neural network. And we feed it all these different dilemmas that eventually makes the intelligence, the artificial intelligence, intelligent enough to make a decision for itself. So yes, I would call a piece of art created by artificial intelligence art because one, it is a learned learned behavior, right? It learned how to stroke brushes. It learned how to mix colors. It learned how to, draw shapes, sizes, figures, depth, perception, shadows, lights, angles, everything that goes into art. Second, it does reflect on it. Why? Because there have been projects done where if an AI does not like its own creation, it completely discards it and then starts from new and makes an entirely different thing. So it can reflect upon whether it likes it or not. And last, it does contemplate whether it has a meaning to it. It does connect to the art, so to speak, because if it did not, then why would the artificial intelligence even go through the process of completely creating something, removing it if it doesn't like it, and then making another thing in its stead? So in my opinion, yeah, it does. I would consider it art. If it's a copy or a replica, then no, because then it's just called a copy. But if it's a genuine, new, never seen before piece of art, and then yeah. And secondly, I will just define the word art and its history. So basically, it's derived from Latin. I think it's ars, ARS, not the Australian and English version of ars, but ars, which means craft or skill. And it can be seen in words like artisan, which means a person who is skilled at making something. It can also be seen in artifact, a thing made by human skill. So the word art in itself just means skill. So no matter what you do, you're an artist.
Okay. Go ahead, Pepper, your turn.
I guess it kind of brings up a good question here because does art need to be intentional? If someone creates a chair just on the basis that it's a chair and that's their only purpose for it, but then I go and I look at it and I'm like, that's a beautiful chair. I think that's art. I'm willing to pay whatever for it. Is it art then? The person didn't have the intention. So then what? This kind of goes on to maybe even nature, like maybe random formations of things like in the sky and how beautiful it looks with certain chemicals and compounds in the sky. I'm like, wow, that's art. Now I can already imagine what some people are saying. Well, maybe that's the art of God for the people. That's what I would imagine people say. But the naturalists will say, well, maybe that's just a random formation, and maybe we're giving meaning to the idea of art. So like you kind of go with the back and forth here. So does it really need to be intentional? I don't really think so.
Yeah, that's a very good perspective. But okay, I will let the queue do the talking. So we have Verushka again. As she said, a lot of times mistakes in painting due to human error add to the value of that painting. True, that's very true. Then we have John. Then is it still a mistake? That's a very interesting take. It was a mistake for him, but I'm out for her. But I guess in this case, it adds some extra layer into the whole aspect. I don't know. That's a good question. Then Mark, in retrospect, no, but in the moment of happening, yes. And then John wants to speak. Then Nancy and Luis went bye-bye. So bye-bye, Luis.
Fernando, to your point earlier, you're saying forced art is an art in one context, but then in another context, your Great Wall of China example says, "Oh, this is art," even though it was forced labor. That by that logic, wouldn't that extend to, say, the people that were thrown into concentration camps being made into art? Because I would disagree if that were the case.
But what specifically are you trying to say with that? Because they did art and such, or you're just acting about the whole
What if a
action of being
German
thrown?
said, "Look at the art I created. I buried these sickening people"?
Yeah, but I'm not saying that that's art. And I think that's a bit different though. First, I don't think it happened. If it happened, that's okay. I don't know. I need more context into that question.
Okay, so if a German said, "I'm forcing you to do this, to create my art," Does that fit the same logic pattern you're following, even though it's significantly more gruesome on spec? Because the remnant is dead bodies instead of a wall.
I mean,
The
I
only thing I'm
guess
challenging is if the same logic holds up.
I'm actually not sure. I have to give it more thought of it. I mean, I'm not sure. But what I'm saying in this case is, at least when it comes to all these forced like construction, like as a culture, at least right now, we see it as art at the end product. Now, if that is art or not, like it's hard to tell. I do agree that it is a more gruesome example. I don't know. What will be your intake?
So you're asking what my take was?
Yes. Or
then no, I wouldn't consider that art. I would consider it an artifact, but not art.
Okay. So through that train of thought, you also consider the pyramids and the Great Wall of China artifacts?
Yes.
Okay. It's good. Now we have Mansi.
Yeah, phenomenal contributions, you all. Again, killer contributions. I kind of wanted to take the conversation in a different direction slightly, but it's of a piece with John's recent example. So breaking it down more, more micro level. I wonder if art can tell us about a culture. If the art that is being produced by a culture or a society, in fact, can tell us information about it that goes beyond merely what that community or what that society or culture finds beautiful or not beautiful, but maybe about the health of that society or that culture. And so here's an example. If you're, let's say you're raising a child and the child starts taking art classes in elementary school and starts creating some art that maybe alarms the teacher. And the teacher says, hey, the art that your young child is creating here is disturbing. Well, based upon the art, we can maybe conclude, post-diagnosis perhaps, conclude affirmatively that, this particular child is maybe going through some difficulties or troubled or something along those lines. So we figured that out because of the art being created by the individual. Now, can you extrapolate that to societies? If the movements in art that are coming out of a certain culture or a certain society, if the art is somehow considered maybe disturbing or is somehow a departure from one's sensibilities or from, you might say, rational sensibilities for what is and is not tasteful, can we then sort of diagnose that society or that community or that culture as, hey, this is a society or a culture that is maybe troubled or losing itself, dissolving in a certain sense?
I mean, we have other type of examples, and I'm sorry that I interrupt. More specifically into the whole like Japanese culture, that sometimes you see some like comics and so that they're extremely gruesome. Like it's almost like unbearable to watch, and they still watch it because they see it as some sort of representation of the more perverted areas of human kind. So I mean, if that's considered art, I'm not completely sure, but I know it exists. Which again, it goes into what John was mentioning. But was that all you wanted to say, Nancy? Just to see if I go into the queue.
Yeah, you can go back to the queue. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of raise that question, and I like your response. Because again, if you were to take John's example, it's like, well, what if this community of, I suppose, Nazis, what if they do find art in execution? What if they're saying to each other, wow, you were a real artist today, the way you took out those bodies? Not to speak insensitively, but it's like, if there's a certain culture or ethos that comes from that sort of, in this case, a Nazi movement, well, we could say, based upon what they're understanding art to be, and the kind of crafts that they want to, I guess, cultivate in their community, that's a that's a bad thing. That could be a scary thing. That's a telltale sign, perhaps, that the morality of the society, the morality of the culture is maybe waning, maybe lacking. But yeah, let's move on to the
Hey, Manzi, real quick.
let's move on to the
John is trying to say something.
Hey, Manzi, real quick. If we flip that on its head, though, we have Holocaust museums. I'm not saying we've made it art, but if we make a museum out of it, what does that mean about our society? Is it strictly a historical reference?
Yeah, what are we appreciating about it? Yeah.
I see. I mean, I was about to say something I kind of forgot, but it's a good intake on that whole aspect. But I remember. So like my question is like, okay, in this hypothetical scenario, like I'm assuming that if a person is Nazi and it sees that like action, let's say like then that society may consider it art, but others maybe not. So is there really like a like can we really say that there's some aspect of art that is just for one and just for another, or should art be art for everyone even though we disagree with what we're seeing?
I actually have some feedback on that. So for the Greeks and the Romans, the naked human body was considered art, and you can see it throughout their statues, paintings, and the customs that were carried down into ancient Christian paintings and murals and whatnot. Because you see a lot of those type of figures there. Sorry, it's I have some clients waiting. But vice versa, if you come into the Asian, Middle Eastern area, they do not consider it art. As a matter of fact, they consider those statues to be offensive. So I agree that art is specific to each culture, and because now in the 21st century, how much all the cultures and everything has intertwined with each other, we have an entirely different take on art from, say, back in the Roman, the Greek, even modern Turkish era that was not too far back ago.
Yeah, I mean, but if that's the case, then the whole definition of art becomes more subjective. So maybe sometimes like a society could be corrupted, and this person is trying to actually open up to a more better approach to how to live society. But since that community do not approve, then they do not consider it art, and then maybe through time that was not considered art becomes an art. So like it seems like it could be too loose in this case, to just be so arbitrary into what is art and what is not. I think. But well, let's continue into the queue. Marcus said, very good point. Then we have Courtney, who said art needs intent. Then Yusha just said, thank you for joining us today. Luis, there you go. Marcus, I could execute the printer though, and it will never know. We have a killer among the myths in here. Then Yusha, unplug, baseball bat. Okay, a little bit more dark. And then we have actual representation of Marcus being like specific to the printer. All right, so Marcus, you said, I think a lot of what defines an artist has to do with being created and creation. And he then asked to have the floor. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I want to go back to another movie example. Where, wait, was my first movie example? Anyway, from
Please
iRobot.
don't say that.
Great movie. No, I'm not gonna say I'm not even on devs right now. This isn't in connection with devs that much, but I mean it can be. But my point is, in iRobot, is everyone familiar with the film? Yeah, great Will Smith film. Solid, my boy. Yes, okay. Thank you, whoever said I love devs in the chat. I love you. Anyway, so in iRobot, there's this robot, and I forget what makes him exactly special. Does anyone know for sure what exactly makes him special?
He becomes conscious at one point.
He becomes conscious?
He's also not bound by the 3 laws of robotics.
That's what it is. That's what it is. That's what I was. There was a specific thing that the creator did to him to make him different. So he has this ability, quote in the movie, to make decisions, and he applies meaning, it shows, to things, and he holds values to, it shows. And at one point, he quickly almost as a printer would, sketches out a beautiful, landscape of the Golden Gate Bridge, being destroyed, and it's hibbling the robots out, as I'm sure we're all familiar with in the film. And is that art? Yes, is that agreed upon?
Mm-hmm.
And do we think of that because of the special the special conditions of that AI's creation? Because what if the other AI that was standing next to him, all these other replicas of him or whatever, busted out that same drawing, okay? That same drawing, because technically they're capable, but there's different intent, obviously, behind the two. One is either saying, this is a command, whatever, and the other saying, let me show you something, whatever.
That was a poor.
What if somebody purchases those printings by that
computer
robot?
sound.
and hangs
This
it
is
up
the
on the wall?
command.
Is it not art?
Wait, say again. I'm sorry.
What if those printings? What if someone purchases them and then puts it on their wall? Is it not art?
Are you talking about the one that is made from like a purely like computerized one?
Yes.
Again, so like, okay, so you're saying then, say a mathematical representation of dots on a graph is represented in some way visually, okay, and say there's some type of equation that goes into representing the dots on the graph, which is who drinks two more cups of coffee, scatter plot across America, in the morning or whatever. Okay, but it's this weird, beautiful scatter plot graph, but it's not actually a map of America. It's just dots, okay, or whatever. And there's feeling towards it. It's a mathematical thing, but it's a thing now that's made through just technicality or whatever, okay. But suddenly can it become art? Like by purchasing it and putting it up on a wall. Again, I think it draws back to the entire point that everything goes back to value and meaning applied. And that can only come from, the human perspective or a human-like perspective. That's what we're doing when we create all these AIs. We're trying to replicate the human experience through, data points, all these different, information, avenues that the AI is receiving, okay, to crunch data. But it's doing it a different way because it's not technically human, but we're trying our best to like replicate, I guess, the technical process of humans doing things. But is there like, I mean, does the Sophia robot give meaning and value to things? I don't know. This is the weird thing. Are we ever going to trust an AI that says, yes, I give value to things? What if it's programmed to say that it gives value to things? Damn it.
Like what? You look like a conspiracy theory right now, like
what are we gonna do?
Here, like moving, like I don't know.
What if we're programmed, Marcus?
Because we're trying to prove the existence of this intangible like concept and idea, and then we're trying to prove the existence of it in physical things, and it's very it's difficult. It's a figure. You got to figure stuff out.
Excuse me, can you repeat that word?
So you got to figure it out. That's what I was saying.
I see.
You misheard.
Yeah, I know. I totally misheard.
But
anyways, listen, Marcus, listen. Sorry I interrupt, but we still have a queue. So do you feel like
No, like respond to me. Someone tell me I'm stupid, please.
Okay, so I think we got confused here in the conversation with this robot example. I thought that was a good question, right? The one that is doing it mechanically like a printer is not an artist. All right, the question is not, is the piece that's created art? Because Orlando pointed out, as soon as a human being like finds value and meaning in that, okay, it's art, congratulations. But the robot, who's basically a glorified printer, is not an artist because they made it. All right, whoever made that robot is the artist because they made a machine that made art. Okay, but the robot, the main character robot, who we've seen characterized as a real person throughout the movie, if they make it, their art, they are an artist because they had will, they had intent, they were able to reflect on their experience and put out a response. They were able to make something that had meaning in it. So we can call them an artist. The product, all right, the art, I think is a separate question. And Verzucha made a great point. Verushka, I'm sorry, made a great point in the chat that you don't have to be an artist to create art. The dumb robot makes art, but it's not art because they made it. It's art because a human being like recognizes something and has a meaningful experience engaging with it, and therefore makes it art. But that robot still is not an artist just because they produced it. They're a printer.
So does art not exist then without humans? I think we can argue that, right? Art
Well, that's
doesn't
a
exist
separate
then.
question. That's a separate
Well,
question.
we
Could
just
argue.
said that, you know, something is defined as art when humans find a value and meaning in it. So if there are no humans to give or find value and meaning in anything, in this universe of rocks colliding with other rocks and hydrogens colliding with carbons and oxygens, etc. If there's not if there's not a being somewhere to look at of a ball of fire and call it a sun, you know, and give it a meaning, you know,
yeah,
is there any it doesn't exist without us personally. I think that's why you start seeing how special, like, you wake up and imagine, because technically all the life you see, okay, and your daily activities, the lawn on your grass, or the lawn on your grass, while the grass on your lawn, the dog.
someone mute Marcus. Why'd you do that? Oh, he's talking about the dog now. I couldn't hear even the name. But someone,
But
Marcus, you're muted. Someone muted you,
I'm
and
muted.
it was not me.
Damn it!
I'm telling you. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. We have
I wasn't listening to
fire,
you at
I'm
all.
afraid.
That's
That's
so
a habit.
Fernando. Saying like
It's
it
not
was
me.
you.
I never do it. No, listen. Like we bar Yusha's like abilities to do things because he was doing that. So, but I never do. So if it is not me, it has to be Orlando. That's the that's the only solution. I don't think Nancy did.
What I was trying to
But
say, okay, was all that life you're seeing is technically the only life in the universe as far as you know it. So when you see it, yeah, there's another dog, okay. Yeah, there's another dog on another floor somewhere, and yeah, there's another grass on some lawn somewhere else, okay. But again, that's the only grass on that lawn in this place at that time, and there's nothing else that matters because it doesn't exist anywhere else, and there's nothing else that exists. That is it. And so that's why.
Hey, Marcus.
you're still muted.
We humans like to think that we're the only ones that can appreciate art, but in fact, that's not the case. You see countless species of birds with beautiful colors and patterns and whatnot just to interact with their mate. Peacocks being the biggest and the foremost example of it. It is us humans giving ourselves value to think that we are more important than something else.
But are they going to look at raindrops falling from the sky, creating a pattern on the ground, and say, damn, that's some raindrops. That looks like my buddy Phil, who's a bird. It looks like a bird. What the heck?
Yeah.
Oh, dang. They can't see meaning in things, though. They see color patterns, and then the little brain processes, oh, this is a really pleasant color pattern to the eyes. So there is an ultimate perspective there, an ultimate like scale of like beauty then almost, because we recognize that animals have some sort of perspective on it, even with a little brain.
Little brain. Wow. So that's a racist right there. That's a racist.
That's speciesist.
That's a speciesist.
All right, y'all. Let's
Let's
I'm just
go into the queue.
We're half an hour. We're half an hour over time. So let's make sure. Let's get through the queue. Let's exhaust the queue, and then we'll go back to
Sure. Let's exhaust the queue. So I'm gonna try to read faster. No, just kidding. So Veruska, you said, so would you consider the AI an artist or the creator of that AI? Which I think was basically what George was saying that she was mentioning. Then Barbara, you said we are in the future with AI, kind of scary but also awesome. Ooh. Then we have Marcus saying it's an accidental ink spill that looks like the Mona Lisa art. Accidentally art, again, art is meaning and value. I mean, I guess that's when the receiver comes into the fray. Then Daphne says, perhaps it's the ability to be imaginative, which Barbara goes into another art assignment video that deals with the definition of art. So another YouTube video, go get it. Yes. So then we have Yusha. Thank you for participating, Courtney. Osita is replying to Yusha saying, is like. the right word? Is the AI not just comparing its creation to a programmed model and discarding it based on how closely the creation matches the programmed model? Then Marcus, and we have somebody leaving, oh, that's so sad. Fuhidi, thank you. We have Marcus. You said the fact we find accidents as art sometimes shows everything is the meaning we give it. Again, John, meaning and value is defined through the eyes of the artist. Then Verushka says, because both derive from pain, forced labor. And then Marcus, interesting. Good point. Again, I'm going to have to create an audiobook eventually. So anyways, John, you said, Nancy, the sun is washing out your face on camera. Thankfully, that's art right there. Not having to see Nancy's face. So then we continue. Bellissimo, bellissimo. So then, then Yusha, you said, Osita, I guess it could be because the AI is not making decisions on what the art is matching. It is making a decision if the AI likes it or not based on what it has learned, based on what was fed into it. Keep in mind that the AI capable of making art is far more advanced than what it was when it was fed those scenarios. Then Marcus, you said, we are trying to give an abstract concept of physical definition, hard and basically impossible to do. Then Yusha, replying to Verushka, I consider both parties to be artists, the creator of the AI because they create something phenomenal, capable of being an individual and being able to understand and generate art. The AI because it can create art. Then Marcus. That's why I saw it's probably through meaning and value than based on the eyes of the artist. Then Orlando, replying to Yusha, aren't humans the same way though? When artists are creating, they typically wait out how the audience will see it, similarly to how an AI may wait out the data. Drinking, wait, delicious. So then we have Marcus. Just I say interesting. Then Yusha, Orlando, not really. When I take my photos, create my art, I couldn't care less what others think about it, and I am sure other artists in the room may agree. Then Marcus said, good point. Then Orlando replied to Yusha, that's true, but you still have, oof, the cue move on me. Yeesh. What happened? Give me a second. That's so sad. I think something happened that we have a third round of recording. This is gonna be interesting on my end, editing this. Okay, so there you go. So that's true, but you still have a component of waiting out information. You are still occupied with how the aesthetics would look. Then Daphne, she said, I think that kind of presentation for remembrances, not art for art's sake. Then Yusha, Orlando, yes, that is always there, especially in photography. Then Daphne saying, I love depth. Yes, this is great. Thank you, Marcus, for bringing that up. He was the one who forced me. Let's say, you see, you forced me, so this art that I saw it, yeah? No, nothing? Okay. So, Yusha, you said Marcus has been trying to get me and Silva towards depth since we became officers. Yeah, that's true. And I actually did watch it, which makes me awesome. Then Verushka, you don't have to be an artist to create art, I think. The distinction is the awareness of what you are creating, which is what differentiates the two robots and their creation from one another. Then Daphne says, I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords. There you go. We're being overruled all of a sudden. Then Marcus, so art doesn't exist without human to find value and meaning in it, which Asita says art doesn't exist without an observer. Then Daphne, you go. I agree with that actually. Outside of nature being a natural form of art, if you believe in God or a form of it, then perhaps he is the artist. Then we have Verushka saying, for the simplicity of the definition, yes, which you just said, I believe that is a better take to Osita. Then Daphne says, puppy. I'm assuming with Marcus and the puppy still there, like running in the grass. Then,
Just to interject really quickly, I do want to highlight that point by Osita. I think it's a really important one. Because again, you know, a common question people hear is, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is no. And I wonder if you can't apply the same exact thing to beauty in art forms. So again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That implies a beholder. If there's nothing to behold, or if there's nobody to behold, what is there to behold? I mean, you could go either way. Then you don't have the phenomenon of aesthetic experience. So yeah, I really think that's a really important point. I want to make sure that we kind of really touched upon that.
No,
because
wait,
again, yeah.
About the tree, only because none of us humans heard it does not mean the tree did not make a sound. Because according to physics, it's impossible for an energy transmittance of that magnitude to not make a single beep, right? That being said, I'm going against what I said just for the conversation's sake, because I agree that without an observer, art is an art, but the tree falling and not making a sound, quote unquote, the tree made a sound. It's just no one heard it. No human heard it. Why? Because again, us humans value ourselves far above and beyond than what we truly are valued at.
Well,
art can be art without an observer.
But what if there's no humans, no birds, nothing with ears per se? So I would say that the tree does still there are sound waves that propagate that have a physical reaction on just nature. You know, leaves might rustle. There is an energy field, right? But you know, if there's nothing to hear it specifically, you can have this energy, but if there's nothing to actually take it in auditorily, process it through some sort of neural network, and you know, translate that into hearing a sound of a tree falling, does it still make a sound? It still produces energy, but does it make a sound if there's nothing with ears to hear?
See, the sound is still there. It's just our lack of ability to perceive those sound waves into what we know as sound. I mean, I'm talking, right? I'm making sound. Sound waves are coming out of my mouth because they're vibrating the particles in the air. And I don't want to make it sound like a physics lesson, but only because we lack the ability to hear it does not mean it's not there.
So basically, it did make a sound. You just weren't there. If you were there, you would hear it.
But I'm not saying, so like, would red exist if if there's nothing to see it? It would exist because that band of electromagnetic frequency would exist, but red wouldn't exist. So like, if you are making a noise, you are making the physical, you know, vibrations that will constitute sound. You're making physical vibrations. That's what I'm saying, is not actually making sound. You're making physical vibrations in the medium of air. And if they reached an ear, if they reached an observer, then it becomes sound. But until an observer can hear that sound, it's just physical vibrations. I don't think you can call it sound. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. But all right, let's
Yeah, let's go into the queue.
Yes.
Okay, so then we have Daphne saying puppy, and then stop trying to silence him. Not sure who is being silenced, but in all caps, so it's important. Then we have John saying raindrops keep falling on my head. Okay, so look an umbrella. And then Marcus, you're next.
Eh? I was joking about that exclamation mark. I just did that because Manzi told us to read the rest of the queue. So I was like, I'm going to put an exclamation mark at the end of the queue. So.
Okay, so no comments here from Marcus. Then we continue. Then Verushka said, thank you for the doggies. That's from Marcus. Then we have George, which is leaving. Then Daphne saying, very well put, Yusha. Then Yusha saying, thank you for participating, George. We'll see you next week. Then John, is the existence of physics an aesthetic experience? Not sure. And I knew it. As soon as I hear the whole ping, 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 I knew it was Yusha. So
Ignore that.
have that.
Ignore
Daphne,
Lando.
that's okay. Daphne saying Marcus. But no, Marcus actually asked us to intervene whenever he's like rambling. Like it's nothing new. He actually asked us to make sure that he's not repeating himself. So it's something that we already talked about. Like constantly. Then you said, what did you say, Marcus?
That's all.
Exactly. So then we have you said, I say yes to that, John, and then lol, 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 and then Orlando doing the same, but LOL. Then you say lol, lol, H, lol, A, lol, 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 all, shh, beep, 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 boop, boop, yay, 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 and then sus, and that's it. Whew, I caught up right there. And then beep,
All
beep,
right,
boop,
folks.
boop. There you go.
Well, that'll do it for today's Philosophy Club meeting. And thanks for coming out to the conference. It's been a wonderful marathon. Started around, officers and I started around 9:30, and here we are. Shout out to the officers, Orlando, Yusha, and Fernando for sticking around the entire time and helping to make sure that this goes off without a hitch. Very awesome stuff. I really appreciate your help. And of course, thanks to everybody who participates in anything philosophy related offered to you through Dallas College.
Hey, Professor. Sorry to cut you off, but Daphne wants to meet with you about something.
Yeah, I assume the
In regard of the collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely, we could do that. But and so I'm excited. So good. There's another event coming down the line, a collaboration. Donka, no problem, Daphne. Yeah, so that'll do it. Next week's topic is art and politics. Same bat time, same bat channel, 3 p.m. every Tuesday. And the next conference probably won't be until November, late November. So yeah, it's been a great one. It's been a great conference, great day, and I couldn't be more grateful for everybody who participated. So thank you.
Okay. So yes, we have last comments just for Barbara appreciating Marcus' talk, and then Marcus saying, "Oh, a spicy topic." So yeah, it's very spicy. If it is spicy for Marcus, it's very spicy indeed. So good stuff.
Hey, Marcus, did you know Orlando still hasn't watched Devs?
He knows. It's a common trend in here. I'm gonna start the recording, just so you know.
What's
Thanks,
Devs,
Ed.
guy? I've never heard of it.